In the wild heart of Wyoming, where untamed spirits dance with the wind, there are forces that cannot be explained by science alone. They whisper through ancient valleys, connect souls across impossible divides. What happens when a single moment of compassion in a raging storm forever alters the course of two broken lives? Some say that certain scars are not wounds but doorways, that certain animals carry more than just instinct in their eyes. They say that once a girl with lightning in her wrist found a dying foal beneath thunderclouds and something extraordinary awakened between them. This is not just a story about saving a wild Mustang. This is about what happens when we dare to reach across the boundaries that separate us from the wild and discover that perhaps those boundaries were never truly there at all. Sometimes the most powerful connections are born in the darkest storms. The lightning split the Wyoming sky like an angry god's hand, illuminating the silhouettes of wild horses scattered across the valley below. Rain pounded the earth in sheets, turning the ground treacherous with mud. Dr. Nathan Winters hunched against the downpour, his camera equipment forgotten, as he watched the thunder sky, heard panic in the storm's fury. "Easy," he whispered, though the wind carried his words away. "Easy now." The stallion, midnight black, with a presence that commanded even the elements, reared at another lightning strike. Nathan had been tracking this magnificent creature for months. The locals called him Shadow Dancer, the most elusive leader of the Thunder Sky herd, known for his unusual intelligence and protective nature. The cliff edge where Nathan stood offered perfect visibility, but the storm had turned it into a death trap. Loose rocks shifted beneath his boots. He should leave, every instinct screamed it, but these were the first clear shots he'd gotten of the entire herd together. Just a few more minutes. A crack like a gunshot. The ledge beneath him gave way. Nathan scrambled for purchase but found only air. His body slammed against the rocky slope, tumbling toward the ravine below. Through the rain and pain, he saw a dark shape charging toward him. Shadow Dancer, breaking from the herd, racing along the ravine's edge. Impossible. The stallion should be fleeing with the others. Nathan's descent halted against an outcropping, his leg twisted at a sickening angle. Above him, the black stallion paced, then in a behavior that would defy everything known about wild Mustangs began to descend the treacherous slope, hooves careful on the loose shale. "Dad," the small voice carried even through the storm. 9-year-old Sage stood at the top of the ridge, her yellow raincoat a beacon in the darkness. She had followed him despite his explicit instructions to stay in the truck. "Sage, get back!" Nathan yelled, as another section of the cliff face crumbled. Shadow Dancer reached him, nudging Nathan with his muzzle. The impossible connection between man and wild horse lasted only seconds before the ground shifted again. Nathan grabbed for the stallion's mane as the ledge collapsed completely. Lightning struck the ridge just feet from where Sage stood. The thunder that followed drowned her scream as she watched her father and the black stallion plummet into the ravine below, disappearing into the storm-swollen waters. The lightning that spared her life left its mark, a starburst pattern on her wrist, the flesh seared in the perfect shape of a horse's hoof. Sage Winters bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding like hooves on hard earth. The nightmare again. Always the same, the storm, the cliff, her father falling with the black stallion, and the pain in her wrist sharp and real as if the lightning had struck only moments ago instead of 7 years past. Dawn was just breaking over the Wyoming mountains, painting her bedroom in pale gold. The Wind River Ranch had stood in this valley for 3 generations, though these days it was more research station than working ranch. Her grandfather Morris kept a few horses and cattle, but the Winters family legacy had always been wild horse observation and advocacy, a legacy that died with her father. Sage touched the scar on her wrist, a perfect horseshoe mark that sometimes seemed to pulse with a life of its own. This morning it felt warm, almost hot to the touch. She'd learned what that meant. The Thunder Sky herd was on the move. She slipped from bed and crossed to the window. The spring thaw had transformed the landscape. Patches of snow still clung to the north-facing slopes, but the valley was greening with new life. Somewhere out there beyond the property line, where Wind River Ranch met public lands, the last descendants of Shadow Dancer's herd roamed free. The smell of coffee drifted up the stairs, followed by the clatter of pots. Her grandfather was awake, already preparing for the day. A quiet, sturdy man of 68, Morris Winters, had raised Sage since the accident, while her mother, Elena, traveled the world as a wildlife photographer, returning home for brief visits that grew increasingly awkward as the years passed. Sage dressed quickly in worn jeans and a flannel shirt. She braided her dark hair without looking in the mirror, a habit formed during years of avoiding her own reflection. Too many people said she had her father's eyes. Morris stood at the stove when she entered the kitchen, his weathered face creasing into a smile that never quite reached his eyes. A former veterinarian, he'd retired early to help raise Sage, though she knew he still treated half the animals in the county from the small clinic attached to the barn. "You're up early," he said, sliding a plate of eggs across the counter. "Bad dreams again." Sage nodded, not needing to explain. "The herd's moving," she said instead, touching her scar. "They're heading north earlier than usual." Morris's expression shuddered slightly. He never questioned how she knew where the Thunder Sky herd was. He'd seen enough evidence over the years that her connection was real, but it clearly unsettled him. "Spring's coming early this year," he said, turning back to the stove. "You've got school. Don't forget your science project is due Friday." The unspoken message was clear focus on normal teenage things, not wild horses, not the family legacy that had already claimed one Winters. Sage ate in silence, her eyes drawn to the collection of photographs lining the kitchen wall. Her father at various ages, always with horses, Morris in his younger days treating wild Mustangs on government roundups before he became disillusioned with the program. Her mother, Elena, beautiful and distant, camera in hand. And a single photo of Sage herself, age 8, sitting atop a gentle mare, her father's hand on the reins. The last time she'd been on a horse. "I'll be late tonight," Morris said, pouring coffee into a thermos. "Mrs. Henderson's mare is about to foal. Don't wait up." Sage nodded, gathering her backpack. "I'll make dinner before I start homework." The familiar exchange completed, they moved through the morning routine with practiced efficiency. Morris never asked if she planned to ride out and observe the herd after school. She never volunteered the information. The unspoken agreement had kept peace in the house for 7 years. Her grandfather's ancient truck growled to life outside as Sage finished washing the breakfast dishes. She watched through the window as he drove down the long dirt driveway, dust billowing behind him. Only when he turned onto the main road did she retrieve the binoculars from their hiding place behind the bookshelf. Today she'd head directly to Falcon Ridge after school. If the herd was moving north, that's where they'd pass through. Metbrook High School loomed against the morning sky, a rectangular brick building that housed all 312 students from the surrounding ranching communities. Sage locked her bike to the rack and kept her head down as she navigated the courtyard, invisible by choice and reputation. "Hey, Ghost Girl." The nickname had started 3 years ago when Sage had been caught talking to thin air at the edge of the school property. She hadn't been talking to ghosts, she'd been talking to a hawk perched in a nearby tree, but the label stuck, fueled by her quiet demeanor and the rumors about how her father died. Sage ignored the call, slipping through the main doors and down the hallway to her locker. Inside, she kept her world meticulously organized textbooks arranged by class period, a small notebook filled with wildlife observations, and a photo of her father tucked behind her schedule. "All right, everyone, take your seats," Mrs. Delaney called as Sage entered the biology classroom. "Today we're assigning partners for the end-of-year ecosystem projects." Sage slid into her usual spot at the back, already dreading what was coming. Group projects were her personal nightmare. Sage Winters. Mrs. Delaney consulted her list. "You'll be working with Willow Coleman." A collective murmur rippled through the classroom. Willow Coleman, seated near the front and surrounded by her usual admirers, turned to fix Sage with a look of perfectly curated dismay. With her designer clothes and immaculate blonde hair, Willow occupied a different universe than Sage, the queen of Metbrook High, paired with the school ghost. "Mrs. Delaney," Willow's hand shot up, "I already promised Taylor we'd work together." "The assignments are final, Miss Coleman," Mrs. Delaney said firmly. "This project requires diversity of perspective. You and Miss Winters will study the riparian ecosystem along Wolf Creek." Sage kept her expression carefully neutral as Willow turned again, this time with narrowed eyes that promised retribution for this inconvenience. As the daughter of Reed Coleman, owner of the largest ranch in the county, Willow was accustomed to getting her way. The Coleman Ranch shared a boundary with public lands where the Thunder Sky herd often grazed. Reed Coleman was known for his vocal opposition to wild horse protections, claiming they damaged grazing lands and competed with cattle for resources. The animosity between the Coleman and Winters families stretched back decades. You'll all need to arrange time outside of class to conduct your field observations, Mrs. Delaney continued. The final presentation will account for 30% of your grade. When the bell rang, Sage gathered her books quickly, hoping to escape before Willow could confront her. She almost made it to the door. "Hey, Winters!" Willow's voice cut through the classroom chatter. "We need to talk about this project." Sage turned to meeting the taller girl's gaze. "What about it?" "I'm not failing biology because I got stuck with you," Willow said, flipping her hair over one shoulder. "Meet me at the library after school tomorrow. And try not to be weird." "I have plans today," Sage replied, thinking of the herd. "Not today. Tomorrow." Willow spoke slowly, as if addressing a child. "And don't expect me to go trudging through the mud for this thing. We can use my dad's environmental impact reports for the creek data." "That's not how scientific observation works," Sage said before she could stop herself. Willow's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Look who's suddenly chatty. Tomorrow, library 3:30, don't be late." She swept past trailing expensive perfume and the giggles of her friends, leaving Sage to wonder how she'd survive the next 3 weeks, partnered with Reed Coleman's daughter. The Bell Creek General Store had stood at the crossroads for over 80 years, serving as both supply depot and social hub for the scattered community. Sage propped her bike against the wooden porch and entered the bell above the door, announcing her arrival. Martha Kingsley looked up from behind the counter, her weathered face breaking into a smile. "Sage Winters twice in 1 week. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Just grabbing some trail mix," Sage said, heading for the snack aisle. "Thought I'd go riding this afternoon." Martha nodded knowingly. By riding, she understood Sage meant hiking out to observe the wild horses, a distinction everyone in town respected, never mentioning that the girl who'd once been inseparable from horses now refused to mount one. "Your grandfather was in earlier," Martha said. "Mentioned you got paired with the Coleman girl for a school project. That should be interesting." News traveled at the speed of light in Metbrook. Sage managed a non-committal shrug as she selected her snacks and a bottle of water. "Don't let that family get to you," Martha continued. "Colemans have been causing trouble in this valley since before you were born." A gravelly voice spoke from the back of the store. "Trouble's just another word for change, Martha. Some folks can't tell the difference." Walter Running Bear emerged from between the shelves, his presence filling the small store despite his age. At 85, the Lakota elder moved with a dignity that spoke of a lifetime on horseback. Though he'd retired from ranch work decades ago, he remained a fixture in the community, respected even by those who dismissed his old ways as superstition. "Mr. Running Bear," Sage nodded respectfully. "Little Winters." He returned the nickname, oddly comforting. "Heading out to see the Sky Dancers today." Sky Dancers, Walter's name for the Thunder Sky herd drawn from old Lakota stories. He was the only person who spoke openly about Sage's connection to the horses, treating it as natural rather than something to be hidden or feared. "Yes, sir. They're moving north early this year." Walter nodded, his dark eyes twinkling. "Spring comes when it chooses, not when the calendar says. The horses know." Martha rang up Sage's purchases, adding a homemade cookie. "On the house." As Sage turned to leave, Walter touched her shoulder. "The fire souls are restless this year," he said, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "They feel the change coming." Sage hesitated. Walter's stories about fire souls, the Lakota belief that some wild horses carried a sacred fire within them that could connect to certain humans, usually held hidden meanings. "What kind of change?" she asked. Walter's gaze drifted to the window where dark clouds were gathering on the distant horizon. "The kind that reshapes valleys, Little Winters. Best be watchful." Outside, Sage paused to study those gathering clouds. Despite the spring sunshine, a storm was building over the mountains. She checked her watch, still enough time to reach Falcon Ridge before it hit. Her scar tingled as she pedaled out of town, a gentle warmth that grew stronger as she turned onto the dirt road leading into public lands. The Thunder Sky herd was closer than she'd expected. Something was driving them faster than their usual patterns. By the time she hit her bike in the familiar stand of aspens and began the hike up to her observation point, the warmth in her scar had become an insistent pulse. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and something else, the musk of many horses moving together. Sage reached the ridge that gave Falcon's Point its name, a natural overlook, shaped like a raptor's head. Crouching behind a boulder, she raised her binoculars and scanned the valley below. There they were. The thunder sky herd moved like a living river across the landscape, perhaps 30 horses in total. Fewer than last year, Sage noted with concern. At the front rode a dappled gray stallion, not Shadow Dancer, who had perished with her father, but his son Rising Storm, who had taken leadership of the herd. Sage recorded the date, time, and approximate herd count in her small notebook, then settled in to observe their movement patterns. This was her ritual, her connection to her father's work. Though she never shared her observations with anyone but Walter, the detailed notes filled dozens of journals at home. A movement at the rear of the herd caught her attention. A pregnant mare, heavy with foals, struggled to keep pace. The chestnut mare with a white blaze had been part of the herd for years. Sage had named her Autumn Fire for her coloring. Even through the binoculars, Sage could see the mare was in distress. Her sides heaved with exertion, and she repeatedly fell behind, only to surge forward again to catch up. The rest of the herd, driven by some unseen urgency, continued their relentless pace. "Slow down," Sage whispered as if the stallion could hear her. "She needs rest." But the natural world followed its own rules. As Sage watched Autumn Fire, stumbled, recovered, then gradually slowed to a stop as the distance between her and the herd increased. Rising Storm hesitated, circling back briefly, but the imperative to lead the herd to safety before the approaching storm overrode even the stallion's protective instincts. The mare was being left behind. Sage lowered her binoculars, conflict churning inside her. Wild horse management protocol was clear. Non-intervention was the rule. Nature made its own harsh decisions. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "We observe, we document, but we don't interfere." But Autumn Fire wasn't just struggling, something was wrong. The mare pawed at the ground, then slowly collapsed onto her side, her body contorting in what Sage recognized as labor contractions. The foal was coming weeks earlier than it should. Sage reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. "Grandpa," she said when Morris answered. "The mare from the north herd, Autumn Fire, she's foaling early. I'm at Falcon Ridge." A pause. "Sage, you know the protocol. Where's the herd?" "Moving on. They left her." Sage's voice tightened. "Something's wrong, Grandpa. She's in distress." "Don't interfere." Morris's voice grew stern. "That's how—" He stopped abruptly, but Sage heard the unspoken end of the sentence. "That's how your father died." The first heavy drops of rain began to fall as thunder rumbled in the distance. "I'll come out," Morris said finally, "but it'll take me 40 minutes. Just stay back and observe until I get there." "Hurry," Sage said, ending the call. Below, Autumn Fire thrashed in increasing distress. The foal was malpositioned. Sage had seen enough births at her grandfather's clinic to recognize the signs. Without help, both mare and foal would die. 40 minutes would be too late. Sage stared at her scar, now burning hot against her skin. In the fading light, it almost seemed to glow, the horseshoe pattern vivid against her pale wrist. 7 years of caution, 7 years of keeping her distance, 7 years of her grandfather's warnings. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she whispered, stuffing the binoculars into her backpack and starting down the steep path toward the valley floor. The storm was coming, and Sage Winters was about to break the most important rule of all. The town hall meeting had been Reed Coleman's idea, but now, watching the crowded room divide into factions, he wondered if he'd miscalculated. On one side sat the ranchers and business owners who supported his proposal for an emergency wild horse gather. On the other, a smaller but vocal group of conservationists and horse advocates. Reed adjusted his Stetson, a gesture that projected confidence while giving him a moment to collect his thoughts. At 53, he cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with the weathered complexion of a man who spent most of his life outdoors. Coleman Ranch had been in his family for 4 generations, growing from a modest homestead to one of the largest cattle operations in the state. "The facts are simple," he continued, gesturing to the charts displayed on the screen behind him. "Wild horse populations in this region have increased 30% in the last decade. The rangeland can't sustain those numbers, especially with drought conditions predicted this summer. Those numbers are inflated, called Walter Running Bear from the back of the room. Despite his age, the old Lakota's voice carried clearly. The BLM's own helicopter counts show fewer horses than you're claiming. Reed forced a patient smile. With all due respect, Mr. Running Bear, the federal counts don't account for seasonal migration patterns. Our consortium of ranchers has funded independent research that shows research paid for by the same people who want the horses removed, interrupted Morris Winters, rising from his seat. Hardly impartial data. The tension in the room thickened. Reed had expected opposition from Morris. The men had maintained a cold civility since Nathan Winters' death. Their former friendship buried beneath the weight of that tragedy and the questions that lingered. The point remains, Reed said firmly, that these horses are destroying grazing lands, damaging watershed areas, and competing with wildlife for increasingly scarce resources. This isn't about removing all wild horses. It's about managing the population at sustainable levels. Morris stepped forward, his usually quiet demeanor giving way to passion. What you're proposing is a roundup during foaling season, when mares and newborns are at their most vulnerable. The stress alone will kill many of them, not to mention the injuries from helicopter pursuit. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reed had deliberately downplayed the timing, knowing it would be a sticking point. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater ecological good, Reed replied. And speaking of timing, I've received word that Clearwater Genetics has approved a significant research grant for our region. Their interest is in studying adaptation patterns in isolated equine populations, which could benefit domestic horse breeding programs nationwide. This announcement had the desired effect, a shift in the room's energy as people processed the potential economic implications. Clearwater was a major player in veterinary pharmaceutical development. Before Morris could respond, the town hall doors opened, admitting a tall woman in a Bureau of Land Management uniform. Kate Harrison, the regional BLM director, nodded briefly to the crowd as she made her way to the front. Ms. Harrison, Reed acknowledged with forced cordiality. Her presence wasn't unexpected, but he'd hoped to solidify community support before the federal representatives arrived. Mr. Coleman, she returned coolly, I see you've started without us. Just presenting the rancher's perspective, Reed smiled. We're grateful for the BLM's attention to our concerns. Kate turned to address the room, her expression professionally neutral despite the tension. At 45, she'd worked her way up through the BLM ranks, earning respect for her balanced approach to the often contentious issue of wild horse management. The Bureau appreciates community input on these matters, she began. I want to clarify that no decisions have been made regarding an emergency gather. We're monitoring the Thunder Sky herd closely, but current conditions don't meet the emergency threshold under federal guidelines. Reed stepped closer. With all due respect, Director Harrison, those guidelines don't account for the economic impact on local ranching operations. My cattle can't compete with hundreds of feral horses for grazing rights that we pay significant fees to maintain. Those feral horses, as you call them, Morris interjected, are federally protected wildlife that have historical priority on these lands. Wildlife that mysteriously expands its territory whenever new mining interests are discovered. Walter added from the back, his comment eliciting uncomfortable shifts among some of the business representatives. Kate raised a hand for quiet. All perspectives will be considered. The BLM will conduct an independent assessment before any action is taken. The meeting deteriorated from there into the familiar arguments that had divided Metbrook for generations. As people began to disperse, Reed caught Morris Winters watching him with an expression that went beyond their usual animosity. You've aligned with Clearwater, Morris said when they found themselves momentarily alone. You know what they really want. Reed stiffened. I know they're offering research funding that could benefit this entire community. Like the research you and Nathan disagreed about? Morris's voice dropped. The same research that led my son to be out on that ridge during a lightning storm. The accusation hung in the air between them. Reed adjusted his hat again, a shield against the older man's penetrating gaze. Nathan's death was a tragic accident, he said finally. One that I mourn to this day. But it doesn't change the reality that these horses need management. They need protection, Morris countered, especially from people who see them as research subjects rather than living creatures with their own right to exist. Reed watched the older man walk away, joining Walter by the exit. The two men, one a former veterinarian, the other a tribal elder, made an unlikely alliance bound by their shared belief in wild horse preservation. Kate Harrison approached her, expression guarded. Coleman, a word? They stepped outside into the spring evening, the air heavy with the scent of rain. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, painting the mountains in ominous shadow. Your Clearwater connection wasn't in any of the documentation you submitted to my office, Kate said without preamble. Reed shrugged. The grant was just confirmed. I'll have my office forward the details. Do that. Kate studied him with professional suspicion. And understand that any gather operation will follow strict protocols. If this is approved, and that's still a significant, if it won't be the rushed operation you're pushing for. The Thunder Sky herd is causing documented damage. The Thunder Sky herd, Kate interrupted, has unique historical significance and genetic markers that make it a priority for preservation, not reduction. Nathan Winter's research established that conclusively. Reed's jaw tightened at the mention of his former colleague. Nathan's research was preliminary and emotionally biased. It was peer-reviewed and accepted by 3 separate journals, Kate countered, and it remains the most comprehensive study of that specific herd. Unless you have new data that contradicts it, the question carried a challenge. Reed chose his words carefully. Clearwater's interest suggests the genetic aspects of Nathan's work may have merit. Their research could actually support preservation through better understanding. Kate's skepticism was evident, but she nodded. I'll expect those documents. And Coleman, if I find out this sudden urgency has more to do with Clearwater's commercial interests than ecological concerns, the conversation will shift dramatically. She walked away, leaving Reed alone with the gathering storm. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Dr. Mercer Coleman here. We may need to accelerate our timeline. Harrison is asking questions about Clearwater's involvement. He paused, listening. No, the Winters girl doesn't know anything. She avoids horses completely since her father's accident. Another pause as he glanced toward the mountains where the Thunder Sky herd roamed. Yes, I'm certain. The only Winters we need to worry about is the grandfather, and he has no proof of anything. Proceed as planned. The rain fell in sheets by the time Sage reached Autumn Fire. The mare lay on her side, sides heaving with contractions, eyes wide with pain and fear. She thrashed weakly as Sage approached, but lacked the strength to rise. Easy, Sage murmured, using the gentle tone she'd learned from her father. Easy, girl. I'm here to help. The mare's eyes rolled, showing white, but something in Sage's voice seemed to reach her. She stilled slightly, allowing the girl to move closer. Sage had assisted her grandfather with difficult foalings before, but always with domestic horses in the controlled environment of the clinic. This was different, a wild mare in the open elements, with a storm intensifying around them. Kneeling beside the horse, Sage gently examined her condition. The foal was malpositioned as she'd feared. One leg was visible, but the other remained tucked inside, preventing proper delivery. I need to reposition the foal, she told the mare, maintaining a constant stream of soft words. This will be uncomfortable, but I'm trying to help. Taking a deep breath, Sage reached inside to find the tucked leg. The mare whinnied in distress but didn't strike out. With careful, gentle movements, Sage located the second leg and slowly, painstakingly guided it into the proper position alongside the first. That's it, she encouraged as she felt the foal shift. That's it, Autumn. The mare seemed to understand, gathering her remaining strength for a mighty push. Sage supported the emerging foal, cradling its head as it slid into the world in a rush of fluid and membrane. A colt, small, too small for a full-term foal, with a deep chestnut coat that promised to match his mother's rich coloring. Most striking was the perfect white star blazing on his forehead, bright against the red coat. Hello there, Sage whispered quickly, clearing fluid from the tiny nostrils and mouth. The foal didn't move. She rubbed his chest vigorously, anxiety mounting. Come on, little one. Breathe. Nothing. Sage looked to Autumn Fire, whose breathing had become shallow and labored. The difficult birth had taken too much from her. The mare's eyes found Sage's holding a depth of awareness that transcended the usual boundaries between human and wild animal. Please, Sage pleaded, returning to the motionless foal. Please breathe. She continued the stimulation, rubbing the small body with her jacket, willing life into the still form. After what seemed an eternity, the foal shuddered and drew a ragged breath. Then another. His enormous dark eyes flickered open, focusing briefly on Sage before closing again. "That's it," she encouraged, relief flooding through her. "Fight!" A weak nickering sound drew her attention back to Autumn Fire. The mare's eyes were dimming, her own life ebbing as her foals began. She made another soft sound, nudging weakly toward her baby with the last of her strength. "I'll take care of him," Sage promised, tears mingling with the rain on her face. "I swear it." The mare's eyes held Sage's for one final moment of connection before the light in them faded completely. Autumn Fire was gone, leaving her newborn foal orphaned in the storm. Sage sat back on her heels, the magnitude of what had just happened washing over her. She had broken the non-intervention rule. She had delivered a wild horse foal whose mother had died, and now she faced an impossible decision. The sound of an approaching vehicle broke through the rain. Headlights swept across the valley as her grandfather's truck bounced along the rough track. Morris Winters emerged, a dark silhouette against the storm, his expression transforming from concern to shock as he took in the scene before him. "Sage, what have you done?" His voice carried even over the downpour. "The mare was dying," Sage explained, still cradling the newborn foal. "I couldn't just watch." Morris approached slowly, examining the dead mare with experienced eyes. "Sometimes that's nature's way, Sage." "No." Sage's voice was firm beyond her 16 years. "He deserves a chance." Morris sighed, crouching beside his granddaughter. He gently examined the trembling foal, his practiced hands running along the spindly legs, checking the heartbeat. "He's premature," Morris confirmed. "Needs colostrum right away. Even then, his chances aren't good. But there is a chance." Sage met her grandfather's concerned gaze, seeing the conflict within him. "A small one," he admitted. "But Sage, this isn't like rescuing a stray cat. This is a wild Mustang. These horses are protected. There are laws." "Laws that would let him die," Sage challenged. Morris glanced at the darkening sky. "We need to move the mare away from the herd's territory. If we take him, we need to do this right." He paused. "And you need to understand, even if he survives, he can never truly be ours." Sage nodded, relief washing over her. "I understand." Together they wrapped the foal in blankets from Morris's emergency kit. The older man carried him to the truck, while Sage followed her eyes, never leaving the tiny creature. "I'm calling Dr. Rodriguez," Morris said as they drove back to their ranch. "She needs to examine him immediately." Sage didn't respond, too focused on keeping the foal warm, whispering encouragement as his breathing grew more labored. The scar on her wrist tingled with unprecedented intensity, almost burning against her skin. Back at the ranch, Dr. Teresa Rodriguez arrived within the hour, her face grave as she examined the foal in the warm kitchen. The tiny Mustang lay on a makeshift bed of blankets, his eyes closed, barely moving. "He's severely underweight and hypothermic," Dr. Rodriguez said, preparing an IV line. "The lung development is minimal. I've seen domestic foals in better condition not make it through the night." "But you've seen some survive," Sage pressed. Dr. Rodriguez gave her a gentle look. "Sage, I need you to be prepared. The odds aren't in his favor." "I'm not asking about odds," Sage insisted. "I'm asking if it's possible." The veterinarian sighed. "Yes, it's possible. But Sage, even if he survives, you need to understand something. This is a wild Mustang. They don't domesticate like regular horses. Their spirit is different." "I'm not trying to break his spirit," Sage said quietly. "I just want to give him a chance to live." Dr. Rodriguez administered antibiotics and fluids, while instructing Sage and Morris on tube feeding the foal with a colostrum replacement. The night stretched ahead, filled with uncertainty. "I'll be back in the morning," Dr. Rodriguez said, packing her equipment. "Call me if anything changes. He needs to be fed every 2 hours through the night." She paused at the door. "And Sage, you need to contact the BLM tomorrow. They need to know about the mare and about him." After she left, Morris touched Sage's shoulder. "I'll take the first shift. You need some sleep." Sage shook her head. "I found him. He's my responsibility." Morris recognized the stubborn set of her jaw, so like her father's, and nodded. "All right, but I'm staying up with you." They settled in for the long night, the kitchen becoming a makeshift intensive care unit. Sage talked to the foal, constantly telling him stories, promising him adventures if he just kept fighting. "What will you name him?" Morris asked in the early hours of the morning as they prepared another bottle. Sage watched the foal, his chest rising and falling in the soft light. The white star on his forehead seemed to glow against his dark coat. "Ember," she said finally, "because he fell from the sky when I needed him most." Morris raised an eyebrow, but didn't question her further. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the warm kitchen of Wind River Ranch, a girl and an orphaned Mustang foal began a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about connection, belonging, and the boundaries between wild and tame. By dawn, Ember had survived the night, defying the first prediction. He had taken several feedings, his breathing steadier, though still weak. As the sun rose, Sage helped him stand for the first time on wobbling legs that seemed too long for his small body. "That's it," she encouraged as he teetered precariously. "You've got this." Morris watched from the doorway, a complex mixture of pride and worry on his face. "Dr. Rodriguez will be impressed," he admitted. "But Sage, don't get too attached. The BLM might—" "I know," Sage interrupted. "But right now he needs us." The foal took an uncertain step, then another, his dark eyes fixed trustingly on Sage. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a world washed clean and bright with promise. But Sage knew the real storm. The one that would determine Ember's fate was just beginning. The news traveled fast in Metbrook. By noon, Sheriff John Howard's patrol car pulled up outside Wind River Ranch. The sheriff was a reasonable man who'd known Morris for decades, but he was also bound by the law. "Morris," he said, nodding to the older man on the porch. "Sage, I heard about the foal." "News travels fast," Morris commented. "Small town?" Sheriff Howard replied with a shrug. "Look, I'm not here officially, but I thought you should know Reed Coleman saw you bringing that foal home. He's already called the BLM." Sage stepped forward. "The mayor was dead, Sheriff. He would have died too." Sheriff Howard softened slightly. "I believe you, Sage, but that doesn't change the fact that wild horses are protected. The BLM has jurisdiction here." "So they'd rather he died out there?" Sage demanded. Morris placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Sage," Sheriff Howard sighed, "I'm just giving you a heads up. Agent Parker from the regional office will probably be out here today or tomorrow. Be straight with him. Document everything. Show that you did what you had to do to save the animal." "Thank you, Sheriff," Morris said. After he left, Sage returned to Ember, who was sleeping beside the wood stove. His little body seemed stronger already, but she knew they weren't out of the woods yet. "We need to document his care," Morris said, bringing in his old veterinary camera. "Photos, videos, feeding schedules, medication logs, everything." Sage nodded, already planning how to prove they had acted humanely and responsibly. But as she watched the orphaned foal struggle to stand again, a deeper certainty settled in her heart. This wasn't just about saving a life. Something profound had happened in that storm-swept valley. A connection had formed that transcended rational explanation. She touched the scar on her wrist, still warm and tingling, with an energy she couldn't explain. Ember's eyes found hers across the room, holding a depth of awareness that reminded her of his mother's final gaze. "We belong together," she whispered too softly for her grandfather to hear. "I don't know why, but we do." Outside, the spring sun illuminated a world transformed by the storm. New life pushed through the soil, birds returned to their nesting grounds, and somewhere in the distance, the thunder sky herd continued their ancient patterns across the Wyoming wilderness. But here in this moment, one small piece of that wildness had found its way into Sage Winter's heart, igniting an ember of connection that would soon burst into flame. The coming days would test that connection in ways neither girl nor foal could imagine. Forces were gathering: human ambition, natural threat, and mysteries long buried that would either extinguish the ember or fan it into a wildfire that could transform an entire community's understanding of what it meant to be truly wild and truly connected. For now, though, Sage simply sat beside the sleeping foal, her scarred wrist resting lightly against his star-marked forehead, two orphans finding in each other the beginning of something like home. Darkness had long settled over Wind River Ranch when Sage finally allowed exhaustion to overcome her vigilance. Curled on the kitchen floor beside Ember's makeshift bed, she drifted into restless sleep, her hand still resting on the foal's flank to monitor his breathing. Midnight came and went. The old farmhouse creaked and settled around them. Morris had retreated to his armchair, unwilling to leave them, but unable to stay awake any longer. Then, without warning, Ember stopped breathing. The sudden stillness jolted Sage from sleep. She bolted upright, panic flooding her system as she realized the tiny chest beneath her hand no longer rose and fell. "No, no, no," she whispered frantically, pressing her ear to his ribcage. Silence. "Grandpa, he's not breathing." Morris was instantly alert, decades of veterinary emergencies having conditioned him to wake fully in seconds. He knelt beside the foal, checking vital signs with practiced hands. His heart stopped. He confirmed grimly, already beginning chest compressions with 2 fingers. "Call Dr. Rodriguez." Sage scrambled for her phone, but even as she dialed, she knew help would come too late. The storm had washed out several roads. The vet would never reach them in time. Morris continued CPR, but the minutes stretched on with no response from the motionless foal. "Sage," Morris finally said, his voice heavy with resignation. "He's gone." "No." Denial sharp and immediate. "Keep trying." "Sweetheart, he was too weak, too premature. We did everything we could." Tears blurred Sage's vision as she stared at the tiny body, still warm, but utterly still. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had saved him, connected with him. The white star on his forehead, so bright against his chestnut coat, now seemed to fade before her eyes. "I promised his mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. In desperation, Sage reached for Ember, pulling him into her lap. Her scarred wrist brushed against his forehead and suddenly burned as if touched by fire. Sage gasped, instinctively trying to pull away, but something held her there. The horseshoe-shaped scar began to glow, with an impossible inner light illuminating the darkened kitchen in pulsing golden warmth. "Sage!" Morris's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's happening?" She couldn't answer. The burning sensation spread from her wrist throughout her body, a current of energy that moved from her to the foal and back again. In that moment, Sage felt herself falling through memories that weren't her own, galloping across endless grasslands, feeling the herd's protection, the terror of the storm, the mare's pain, and final determination to save her foal. The connection lasted only seconds, though it felt like a lifetime. When the light faded, Sage found herself trembling, clutching Ember to her chest. And the foal took a breath. A single shuddering inhalation followed by another stronger one. His eyes, impossibly large and dark, flickered open, focusing directly on Sage with an awareness that transcended his few hours of life. "Impossible," Morris whispered, reaching out to check the foal's pulse. His heart's beating stronger than before. Sage could only nod, cradling Ember as he struggled to raise his head. The connection between them hummed like an electric current, no longer visible, but undeniably present. Whatever had just happened defied rational explanation. "You saw it?" she finally managed to ask, meeting her grandfather's stunned gaze. Morris nodded slowly. "I saw something." He hesitated. "Your scar," it glowed. Ember shifted in her arms, attempting to stand on wobbling legs. Sage helped him, supporting his fragile weight as he found his balance. His strength seemed to grow by the moment, as if the mysterious energy exchange had jump-started his failing systems. "Walter's stories," Morris said quietly, watching the transformation with disbelief. "The fire souls. I always thought they were just legends." Sage stroked Ember's neck, feeling the steady pulse beneath her fingers. "What happens now?" Morris studied them both, scientist and grandfather, warring within him. "Now," he said finally, "we keep this between us, at least until we understand what it means." Dawn found them still in the kitchen, Ember now standing steadily, drinking formula from a bottle with surprising vigor. The sickly, failing foal of the previous night had been replaced by an alert, strengthening Mustang who followed Sage's movements with intelligent eyes. Morris documented everything except the midnight miracle, creating a medical record that would satisfy the BLM's scrutiny without revealing what they couldn't explain. Some truths were too extraordinary and potentially dangerous to share. Outside, the world was washed clean by the storm, unaware that in the humble kitchen of Wind River Ranch, ancient magic and modern reality had collided, forming a bond that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between human and wild. Agent Daniel Parker of the Bureau of Land Management arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, his government SUV stirring dust along the ranch driveway. Tall and lanky with the weathered complexion of someone who spent most of his time outdoors, Parker carried himself with the careful neutrality of a career bureaucrat who'd learned to navigate contentious issues. Morris met him on the porch, extending a hand. Agent Parker, thank you for coming out personally. Dr. Winters. Parker's handshake was firm but not challenging. I understand you have a situation with a wild horse foal. My granddaughter found an orphaned Mustang during yesterday's storm. The mother died during foaling complications. Morris gestured toward the house. We've been providing emergency care since then. Parker nodded, his expression revealing nothing. I'll need to see the animal and review your documentation. As they entered the kitchen, Sage looked up from where she sat beside Ember's makeshift pen. The foal had been sleeping, but awoke at the sound of footsteps struggling to his feet with surprising steadiness for his age and condition. Miss Winters, Parker acknowledged, I understand you were the one who found the foal. Sage nodded instinctively, moving closer to Ember, who pressed against her legs. The mare was in distress, separated from the herd. By the time I reached her, she was already in labor. The foal was malpositioned. You have experience with equine birth? Parker asked, kneeling to examine Ember from a respectful distance. My grandfather was a veterinarian. I've assisted with difficult foalings before. Parker studied the foal with professional interest. He's from the Thunder Basin herd. We've been monitoring them. He glanced at the white star marking. Unusual coloration pattern for that genetic line. Trachea. Morris produced the documentation. They'd prepared photos of the deceased mare, video of the initial treatment, detailed logs of feeding and medication. Dr. Rodriguez has been overseeing his care, Morris explained, handing over the veterinarian's report. She'll be stopping by this afternoon for another evaluation. Parker reviewed the materials carefully, his expression unreadable. The protocol is to notify us immediately, he said finally. He wouldn't have survived the wait. Sage argued, her voice steady despite her nervousness. He was hypothermic and couldn't breathe properly. Parker looked at her for a long moment. You understand that wild horses are federally protected. You can't just decide to keep them. I know the law, Sage replied, lifting her chin slightly, but I also know he deserves to live. Something in her directness seemed to register with Parker. He sighed, closing his folder. Here's what's going to happen. Dr. Rodriguez will need to submit official documentation of the foal's condition. You'll need to apply for an emergency foster care permit, which is temporary. The BLM will evaluate whether rehabilitation and release is possible or if he's eligible for the adoption program. And if we don't get approved, Morris asked. Parker's expression hardened slightly. Then he'll be relocated to a BLM facility. Sage felt the floor shift beneath her. But he's still recovering. He needs consistent care. That's why I'm not removing him today, Parker explained. But make no mistake, Miss Winters, this foal belongs to the American people, not to you. After Parker left with copies of their documentation, Sage sank to the floor beside Ember, who nuzzled her hand, seeking comfort. He can't take him, she whispered. Morris sat beside her. Sage, we always knew this was a possibility. But Ember knows me. He trusts me. And that might be what saves him, Morris said gently. If we can prove you're the best chance he has for rehabilitation, we might get approved as fosterers. Sage looked at the tiny foal now curling up against her. What if that's not enough? Morris had no answer for her. Outside, the Wyoming wind picked up, rattling the windows of the old ranch house. Inside, Sage made a silent promise to the orphaned Mustang. Whatever happened, she wouldn't give up on him. Days stretched into weeks, and against all odds, Ember survived. Sage kept meticulous records of his progress. The first time he managed to stand for more than a few minutes, the day he graduated from bottle to bucket, the morning he trotted across the kitchen without stumbling. Each milestone felt like a victory against the ticking clock of the BLM's pending decision. Morris stood in the doorway, watching Sage coax Ember into drinking from a bigger bucket. He's doubled his weight, he observed. Dr. Rodriguez will be impressed. Sage didn't look up, continuing to stroke Ember's neck. She already is. She said she's never seen a premature foal recover this quickly. You know we can't keep him in the house forever, right? Morris said gently. He's getting bigger every day. Sage's hands paused on Ember's neck. The foal was already nearly 3 times the size he was when she found him, his spindly legs growing sturdier, his chestnut coat beginning to shine with health. I know, she admitted, but the nights are still too cold in the barn. Morris sighed. Sage, I've been thinking. Maybe we should prepare for the possibility that— Don't say it, Sage interrupted, her voice tight. We're doing everything right. The application is perfect. Dr. Rodriguez is supporting us. I'm just saying we need to be ready. The BLM doesn't always— The sound of tires on gravel interrupted him. Through the window, they saw Dr. Rodriguez's truck pulling up. When they opened the door, the veterinarian's expression was uncharacteristically bright. I have news, she announced, stepping inside and crouching immediately to examine Ember, who nibbled curiously at her stethoscope. Amazing progress, she murmured, running her hands along his legs and barrel. I've never seen anything like it. What's the news? Sage asked impatiently. Dr. Rodriguez straightened up. I spoke with Agent Parker yesterday. Your application is being reviewed by Director Harrison herself. Is that good or bad? Morris asked. It could be very good, Dr. Rodriguez replied. Kate Harrison has been pushing for more progressive rehabilitation approaches for orphaned foals, and she's interested in your case specifically, Sage. Mine, Sage blinked in surprise. The documentation you've been keeping is exceptional. The bond you formed with Ember is unusual for a wild Mustang. She hesitated. Parker mentioned that Director Harrison might be coming to evaluate the situation personally. Sage's stomach flipped. When we possibly next week, but Sage, Dr. Rodriguez's voice grew serious. You need to prepare him for life outside. He needs to start spending time in the paddock interacting with your grandfather's horses. The more he behaves like a normal, healthy foal, the better your chances. Sage nodded, though the thought of Ember leaving the safety of the house made her anxious. I'll start today, Dr. Rodriguez smiled. That's not all. I've asked Professor Oliver Blackwood from the University of Wyoming to consult on Ember's case. He's an expert in wild horse behavior and rehabilitation. He's very interested in your approach. My approach, Sage echoed. The way you've bonded with him without breaking his spirit. It's unusual, Sage. Most rehabilitation attempts with Mustangs involve a lot more— She searched for the right word. Conventional training methods. After Dr. Rodriguez left, Sage led Ember to the door. The foal had never been outside except for brief trips to a small, fenced area for bathroom breaks. Now he hesitated at the threshold, nostrils flaring at the flood of new scents. It's okay, Sage encouraged. One step at a time. Ember placed one hoof outside, then quickly retreated, pressing against Sage's legs. He's afraid, Morris observed from behind them. He just needs time, Sage replied, stroking Ember's neck. Come on, boy. I'll be right here with you. Eventually, with gentle coaxing, Ember ventured onto the porch, his ears swiveling in all directions, tail swishing nervously. Sage led him slowly toward the small paddock near the barn, where Morris's elderly quarter-horse Duke watched with mild interest. You think Duke will accept him? Sage asked her grandfather. Morris nodded. Duke's good with youngsters. Might be just what Ember needs, another horse to teach him how to be a horse. Ember's introduction to Duke went better than expected. The older horse approached the fence line, nickering softly. Ember hid behind Sage at first, but curiosity gradually overcame fear. By late afternoon, he was mimicking Duke's movements, grazing alongside the fence that separated them. See that? Morris pointed. He's learning already. Sage felt a complicated mix of pride and sadness. Each step Ember took toward normal horse behavior was a step away from the complete dependence he'd had on her. That night, for the first time, Sage prepared a stall in the barn for Ember. She added extra bedding, a heat lamp, and even brought his favorite blanket from the house. It's just across the yard, she told him, stroking his starred forehead. I'll come check on you during the night. Leaving him was harder than she expected. Ember whinnied as she walked away, the plaintive sound following her all the way back to the house. He'll be fine, Morris assured her, though his own expression was concerned. He needs to learn independence. Sage barely slept, getting up every 2 hours to check on him. Each time she found Ember standing alert in his stall, eyes fixed on the door as if he'd been waiting for her. By morning, Sage was exhausted but relieved. Ember had survived his first night away from her. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. The next few days established a new routine. Ember spent mornings in the paddock with Duke learning horse behavior and building strength. Afternoons were dedicated to what Sage called education, gentle exercises to help Ember overcome his fear of common objects and build trust. Word spread through Metbrook about the orphaned Mustang foal. Some neighbors like Martha from the general store dropped by with supplies and encouragement. My father used to tell stories about gentling wild Mustangs, Martha said, watching Sage work with Ember in the paddock. Said they had a different look in their eye than domestic horses. More knowing. Others were less supportive. Reed Coleman, whose ranch bordered Wind River, made no secret of his disapproval. Wild horses are vermin, he declared loudly at the diner in town. Compete with cattle for grazing. Tear up fences. That Winter's girl is wasting her time on that Mustang. BLM should just take it and be done. His daughter Willow, sitting across from him, said nothing, but her expression suggested she didn't share her father's sentiment. The school library was nearly empty when Sage arrived at 3:30 the next afternoon. She spotted Willow immediately seated at a table near the windows, surrounded by textbooks and a sleek laptop that probably cost more than Morris's truck. "You're on time," Willow acknowledged without looking up. "Good start." Sage slid into the chair across from her, pulling out her own worn notebook. "I've been researching Wolf Creek's ecosystem. The spring runoff creates unique microhabitats that I've already outlined the project." Willow interrupted, pushing a color-coded folder across the table. "Each section is clearly marked with who does what. I've taken the statistical analysis and presentation portions. You'll handle field observations and specimen collection." Sage flipped through the meticulously organized materials, impressed despite herself. "This is thorough." "I maintain a 4.0 GPA, Willow replied with a shrug. "I don't leave things to chance." They worked in silence for several minutes, Willow typing rapidly while Sage reviewed the project parameters. The awkwardness between them was palpable. Two girls from opposing sides of Metbrook's deepest divide, forced to collaborate. "So," Willow said finally, her voice deliberately casual, "is it true you have a wild Mustang living in your house?" Sage glanced up, surprised by the question. "He's in the barn now. But yeah, I rescued him after his mother died. My dad says wild horses can't be tamed." "I'm not trying to tame him," Sage replied. "I'm trying to give him a chance at life." Willow seemed to consider this. "Can I see him sometime?" The question caught Sage off guard. Willow Coleman had never shown interest in anything Sage did. They existed in completely different social circles. "Sure," Sage found herself saying. "Come by whenever you want." Willow returned to her laptop, but not before Sage caught a flicker of genuine curiosity in her expression. Perhaps there was more to Reed Coleman's daughter than designer clothes and social status. On Saturday morning, Sage was surprised to see Willow's expensive car parked beside the barn. The rancher's daughter stood awkwardly in the yard, dressed inappropriately in designer jeans and spotless boots. "I didn't think you'd actually come," Sage admitted. Willow shrugged. "Dad's at a cattleman's meeting. Thought I'd see what all the fuss is about." Sage led her to the paddock where Ember was practicing his newest skill, trotting in circles around Duke, who tolerated the youngster with equine patience. "He's smaller than I expected," Willow observed. "He was premature," Sage explained, "but he's growing fast." They watched in silence for a few minutes before Willow asked, "Can I touch him?" Sage hesitated. Ember was still wary of strangers. "Let's see if he'll come to you. Follow my lead." She demonstrated the approach she'd developed, slow, calm, with no direct eye contact. To Sage's surprise, Ember responded to Willow almost immediately, stretching his neck to sniff her outstretched hand. "He likes you," Sage said, not entirely keeping the surprise from her voice. Willow's usually composed face broke into a genuine smile as Ember allowed her to stroke his neck. "He's so soft." Something shifted between the girls in that moment. Not friendship exactly, but a bridge across the divide that had always separated them. "My dad doesn't understand," Willow said suddenly. "About wild horses, I mean. He just sees them as competition for grazing rights." Sage nodded cautiously. "A lot of ranchers feel that way. But they were here first, weren't they? Before the cattle. Before us." There was a thoughtfulness in Willow's voice that Sage hadn't heard before. "Yeah," Sage agreed. "They were. The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted them. Morris emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sage," he called. "Professor Blackwood is here." The man who stepped from the university-marked truck wasn't what Sage expected. Professor Oliver Blackwood was younger than his reputation suggested, perhaps in his early 40s, with quick eyes that immediately focused on Ember in the paddock. "The famous orphaned Mustang," he said by way of greeting, "and his rescuer." He extended a hand to Sage. "Oliver Blackwood, your vet speaks highly of you." Sage shook his hand nervously. "Dr. Rodriguez says you're an expert on wild horse behavior." "I've studied them for 15 years, he confirmed, "but I've never seen a case quite like yours. Mind if I observe him for a bit?" For the next hour, Professor Blackwood watched Ember interact with Duke, with Sage, and even with Willow, who surprisingly stayed for the entire visit. He took notes, occasionally asking questions about Ember's routines and behaviors. "The most interesting thing," he finally said, "is how he's maintained wild instincts while forming such strong human attachments. Usually it's one or the other." "Is that good?" Sage asked anxiously. Professor Blackwood considered. "It's unusual. From a rehabilitation standpoint, it could be very valuable. The ideal is preserving natural behaviors while allowing enough domestication for safe handling." He paused. "I'd like to document his progress if you're willing. It could help other orphaned foals in the future." Sage's heart lifted. If a university professor thought Ember's case was special, maybe the BLM would too. "Of course." After Professor Blackwood left, promising to return in a few days, Willow helped Sage with Ember's afternoon feeding. "The professor seemed impressed," Willow observed. Sage nodded. "I hope the BLM director will be too." Willow hesitated before saying, "My dad mentioned that Director Harrison is tough. She doesn't usually make special exceptions." Sage's stomach tightened. "What else did your dad say?" Willow looked uncomfortable. "Just that the BLM might use your case to set an example about people interfering with wild horses." "I didn't interfere," Sage argued. "I saved him. There's a difference." "I know that," Willow said quickly, "but the rules don't always care about the difference." That evening, Sage sat with Ember in his stall, worry gnawing at her. The foal rested his head in her lap, eyes half closed in contentment. "We have to convince them," she whispered, stroking his forelock. "We have to show them you're special." Morris found her there an hour later, curled up beside the sleeping foal. "Sage," he said gently, "come inside. You've got school tomorrow." Sage didn't move. "What if they take him, Grandpa?" Morris sighed, settling onto the straw beside her. "Then we fight it. We appeal. We do everything we can." He paused. "But Sage, you need to prepare yourself. Sometimes, even when we do everything right, things don't work out the way we want." "That's not fair," Sage whispered. "No," Morris agreed. "It's not." They sat in silence, watching Ember breathe his small sides, rising and falling in the dim light of the barn. The scar on Sage's wrist tingled faintly, a constant reminder of the inexplicable bond they shared. "Your dad used to say that the measure of love isn't how much you want to keep something," Morris said finally. "It's how much you're willing to let it go if that's what's best." Sage's eyes burned with unshed tears. How could taking Ember away be what's best for him? Morris had no answer, and Sage didn't really expect one. Some questions didn't have satisfying answers, especially when the heart was involved. Monday brought a school day that Sage could barely focus through. During lunch, she sat alone as usual, sketching Ember in her notebook instead of eating. "Is that him, the Mustang?" Sage looked up to find Willow standing beside her table, lunch tray in hand. Several of Willow's usual friends watched from across the cafeteria, expressions curious. "Yeah," Sage said cautiously. To her surprise, Willow sat down. "Have you heard anything from the BLM yet?" Sage shook her head. "Professor Blackwood is coming back tomorrow, and Dr. Rodriguez thinks Director Harrison might visit this week." Willow tapped her perfectly manicured nails on the table. "You know, my mom used to be involved with a wild horse sanctuary in Nevada before she married my dad." This was news to Sage. Reed Coleman was notoriously anti-Mustang. "Really?" Willow nodded. "She doesn't talk about it much anymore, but she has connections. People who advocate for wild horse protection." She hesitated. "Maybe she could help." Sage stared at her confused by this unexpected alliance. Why would you want to help me? Willow looked genuinely offended. Because I'm not my father Sage, and because I've seen how special Ember is. After school, Sage rushed home to find Professor Blackwood's truck already parked in the driveway. Inside the barn, he was setting up recording equipment while Morris looked on with interest. Ah, Sage, Professor Blackwood greeted her. Perfect timing. I want to document Ember's interactions with you. His responses are quite remarkable. For the next 2 hours, Sage went through their daily routine while Professor Blackwood recorded everything. Ember seemed to enjoy the attention, showing off his growing coordination and responding to Sage's voice commands with enthusiasm. The level of trust is extraordinary, Professor Blackwood commented. Most Mustangs never achieve this kind of comfort with humans, even after years of training. Sage beamed with pride. He knows I'd never hurt him. Precisely. Professor Blackwood packed up his equipment. That's what makes this case so valuable from a research perspective. You've achieved connection without domination. He paused. Director Harrison will be here on Thursday. I'll be joining her if that's all right. Sage's heart skipped. Thursday? That's so soon. I've shared my preliminary observations with her, Professor Blackwood continued. She's very interested. Is that good or bad? Morris asked. Professor Blackwood's expression turned diplomatic. Kate Harrison is fair, but she's bound by regulations. Your case doesn't fit neatly into existing frameworks. He glanced at Ember, who was now playing with a ball Sage had introduced him to yesterday. That said, I believe there's merit in exploring new approaches to orphaned foal rehabilitation. I've told her as much. After he left, Sage focused on preparing for Thursday's visit. She reviewed all their documentation, cleaned Ember's stall until it shone, and ran through every exercise they'd practiced. You're going to wear him out, Morris warned as Sage led Ember through his paces for the third time that day. I just want everything to be perfect, she replied. Morris placed a hand on her shoulder. Sage, you've done everything possible. Now we just have to trust that they'll see what we see. That night, Sage couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, imagining worst-case scenarios. Around midnight, she gave up and headed to the barn in her pajamas and boots. Ember nickered softly when she entered, immediately coming to the stall door to greet her. Hey, boy, she whispered, letting herself into the stall. She sat against the wall and Ember settled beside her, his warm body a comfort against the cool night air. I'm so scared, she admitted to the darkness. I'm scared they'll take you away. I'm scared you won't understand why. She stroked his neck, feeling his steady pulse beneath her fingers. You're not just any horse. You're special, and I need them to see that. Ember shifted, resting his head in her lap. In the moonlight filtering through the barn window, his eyes seemed to hold understanding beyond his weeks of life. Whatever happens, Sage promised, I'll always fight for you. As she sat there, finding peace in the simple rhythm of Ember's breathing, she didn't notice the figure watching from the barn door. Morris, his weathered face soft with concern and pride for his granddaughter, who loved so fiercely, so completely, that it might just be enough to change minds hardened by rules and regulations. Thursday dawned clear and bright, the Wyoming spring finally asserting itself against the lingering winter chill. Sage was up before the sun, making sure everything was perfect for the BLM director's visit. Sage, you need to eat something, Morris insisted, setting a plate of toast on the kitchen table. You can't run on nerves all day. Sage took a distracted bite, her mind already racing ahead to the meeting. What time did they say they'd be here? 10 o'clock, Morris replied, watching her with concern. Sage, I want you to prepare yourself. No matter what happens today. I know, she interrupted. I need to be ready for any outcome. But the truth was she wasn't ready. Not at all. At precisely 10:02, vehicles pulled into the driveway, Professor Blackwood's university truck and a government SUV with official markings. Sage took a deep breath, straightened her shirt, and stepped onto the porch. Professor Blackwood emerged first, followed by Agent Parker, and a woman Sage assumed must be Director Kate Harrison. She was tall with silver-streaked hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and carried herself with unmistakable authority. Miss Winters, she said, extending her hand. I'm Director Harrison. I understand you've been caring for an orphaned Mustang foal. Sage shook her hands, suddenly aware of her palms sweating. Yes, ma'am. Ember, he's in the paddock with our quarter-horse Duke. Director Harrison nodded. Professor Blackwood has shared his observations with me. I'd like to see for myself. As they walked toward the paddock, Sage couldn't help but notice Director Harrison studying her as much as the surroundings. It felt like being under a microscope. Ember trotted to the fence when he saw Sage nickering softly. Despite her nerves, Sage smiled at his enthusiasm. That's unusual behavior for a Mustang, Director Harrison remarked. Even a young one. Yana Ember's special, Sage replied, unable to keep the pride from her voice. He's smart and curious. Learns really fast. For the next hour, Sage demonstrated everything Ember had learned, how he responded to voice commands, how he overcame fear with encouragement, how he interacted with Duke and with humans. Throughout, Director Harrison took notes, her expression revealing nothing. Finally, she turned to Professor Blackwood. Your assessment, as I mentioned in my report, he replied, this case presents unique opportunities for studying Mustang rehabilitation methods. Sage's approach is yielding remarkable results. Director Harrison made a non-committal sound, then addressed Parker. And the legal perspective, Parker shifted uncomfortably. Technically, the emergency intervention was justified given the mare's death and the foal's condition, but long-term custody requires formal approval through proper channels. Director Harrison turned back to Sage. Miss Winters, do you understand that this foal is a federally protected wild animal? That regardless of your personal attachment decisions about his future, must consider what's best for the species as a whole? Sage swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am, but I also think what's best for Ember matters too. He was abandoned. He would have died. Now he has a chance at life. A life in captivity, Director Harrison countered. A life where he's loved and cared for? Sage responded, surprising herself with her boldness, where he can still be who he is, just safer. Director Harrison's eyebrow rose slightly. After a moment, she said, I'd like to speak with Dr. Rodriguez before making any decision, and I'll need to review all your documentation again. Does that mean you're considering letting him stay? Sage asked, hope flaring. It means I'm gathering all relevant information, Director Harrison replied neutrally. I'll have a decision by Monday. As they walked back toward the vehicles, Director Harrison paused, watching Ember follow Sage along the fence line, his focus completely on the girl. You've formed quite a bond, she observed. Sage nodded. He trusts me, and I promised I'd take care of him. Something in Director Harrison's expression softened momentarily. Sometimes, Miss Winters, the hardest part of taking care of wild things is knowing when to let them go. After they left, Sage collapsed onto the porch steps, emotionally drained. What do you think? She asked Morris, who settled beside her. I think you did everything you could, he replied honestly. Now we wait. But waiting proved to be the hardest part of all. The weekend crawled by with excruciating slowness. Sage spent every possible moment with Ember, trying not to think about Monday's looming decision. On Saturday afternoon, as she was teaching him to step over small obstacles in the paddock, she was surprised to see Willow cycling up the driveway this time with a woman following in a sleek SUV. Sage, Willow called, leaning her bike against the fence. This is my mom, Diana. Diana Coleman was nothing like Sage expected. Where Reed Coleman was loud and domineering, his wife was soft-spoken with keen eyes that immediately assessed Ember with knowledgeable interest. Willow's told me about your foal, Diana said, extending her hand to Sage. I hope you don't mind us dropping by. Sage shook her hand, noticing calluses that spoke of someone familiar with ranch work, despite her polished appearance. Of course not. Morris emerged from the barn, surprise registering on his face when he recognized their visitor. Diana Coleman. Been a while. Morris, she acknowledged with a slight nod. Willow's been talking about this Mustang non-stop. Thought I should see for myself. Sage led Ember to the fence. The foal, now more confident around strangers, approached cautiously, nostrils flaring as he sensed the newcomers. Diana made a soft clicking sound, holding her hand palm down at her side, a gesture Sage recognized as one used by experienced horse handlers. Ember responded immediately, stretching his neck toward her. He's got good conformation, Diana observed. Strong chest, good legs, considering his premature birth. She glanced at Sage. Willow says you're waiting on a BLM decision. Sage nodded. Director Harrison visited Thursday. She's deciding by Monday. Kate Harrison, Diana said thoughtfully. We worked together years ago before I married Reed. She studied Ember again. May I come in? Inside the paddock, Diana moved with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime around horses. Ember surprisingly accepted her presence without hesitation. He trusts easily, Diana noted. Only with people who know how to approach him, Sage corrected. He's still wary of most strangers. Diana nodded approvingly. Good. A Mustang should keep some of his instincts. She watched as Ember returned to Sage's side. Willow mentioned the bond between you two. It's even more apparent in person. Will that help with the BLM? Sage asked hopefully. Diana's expression turned guarded. It might. Kate respects evidence. And what you've accomplished here is compelling. She hesitated. But there are political considerations too. Ranchers versus conservationists. The Mustang roundups have been controversial. So they might take Ember just to make a point, Sage asked, anger flaring. They might, Diana admitted. Or they might see this as an opportunity to explore new approaches to orphaned foal rehabilitation. She reached into her purse and handed Sage a business card. I still have contacts in the wild horse advocacy world. If Monday's decision doesn't go your way, call me. After Diana and Willow left, Sage stared at the card in disbelief. Did Reed Coleman's wife just offer to help us fight the BLM? She asked Morris. Her grandfather looked equally puzzled. Diana used to be heavily involved in wild horse conservation before she married Reed. Guess some passions never die completely. Sunday passed in a blur of anxiety. Sage barely slept that night, and Monday morning found her sitting on the porch steps at dawn watching the driveway for any sign of BLM vehicles. Morris brought her coffee settling beside her. Sage, whatever happens today. I know, she interrupted. I need to accept their decision. She looked at him, eyes burning with determination. But if it's the wrong one, I'm not giving up without a fight. Morris sighed but didn't argue. Dr. Rodriguez arrived around 9, parking beside Professor Blackwood's truck, which had just pulled in. Any word? Sage asked immediately. They both shook their heads. Director Harrison asked us to be here when she delivers the decision, Dr. Rodriguez explained. That's all we know. The wait was torturous. Sheriff Howard stopped by ostensibly to check on a different matter, but his concerned glances toward Sage revealed his true purpose. Heard today's the big day, he said. Just want you to know the whole town's pulling for you, Sage. Finally, at precisely 10 o'clock, the government SUV appeared. Director Harrison emerged alone carrying a folder and wearing the same unreadable expression as before. They gathered in the living room, Sage, Morris, Dr. Rodriguez, Professor Blackwood, and Sheriff Howard standing awkwardly by the door. Director Harrison took her time arranging papers on the coffee table. After reviewing all available information, she began formally, including Dr. Rodriguez's medical reports, Professor Blackwood's behavioral assessments, and the extensive documentation provided by Miss Winters. I've reached a decision regarding Mustang Foal, WY2467, known as Ember. Sage's fingernails dug into her palms. The bureaucratic numbering of Ember felt like a deliberate reminder that in the government's eyes he wasn't a companion, but property. Under normal circumstances, Director Harrison continued, an orphaned foal would be transferred to a BLM facility for rehabilitation and eventual release or adoption. However, this case presents several unique factors. She looked directly at Sage. The foal has formed an attachment to Miss Winters that, according to expert testimony, would make separation potentially detrimental to his development at this critical stage. Sage barely dared to breathe. Furthermore, Professor Blackwood's research suggests that the rehabilitation approach being used here may have valuable applications for future cases. Director Harrison glanced at her papers. Therefore, I am granting provisional approval for Sage Winters and Morris Winters to serve as licensed foster caregivers for Mustang Foal WY2467 for a period of 1 year under the following conditions. She outlined a series of requirements: regular veterinary checks, continued documentation, periodic BLM inspections, and a clear understanding that Ember's long-term placement would be reevaluated when he reached 1 year of age. This is not an adoption, Director Harrison emphasized. It's a foster arrangement for research and rehabilitation purposes. The BLM retains ultimate authority over the animal's future. Despite the caveats, relief flooded through Sage. A year. They had a year. Thank you, she managed her voice unsteady. I promise we'll follow every requirement. Director Harrison nodded briskly. See that you do. This arrangement will be closely monitored. She stood gathering her papers. Professor Blackwood will coordinate the research aspects. Agent Parker will conduct monthly inspections. Before leaving, she paused, her official demeanor softening slightly. For what it's worth, Miss Winters, I believe you've done right by this foal. Just remember that your ultimate responsibility is to his well-being, whatever form that may take. After the formalities were complete and the visitors departed, Sage raced to the barn. Ember greeted her with his usual enthusiasm, completely unaware of how his fate had just been decided in the house. We did it, boy, she whispered, hugging his neck. You can stay. That evening, as word spread through Metbrook, a steady stream of visitors arrived bearing small gifts, Mrs. Palmer with special feed supplements. Sheriff Howard with an old saddle blanket, he thought Ember might like even Willow and Diana, stopping by with a handmade halter specifically sized for a growing foal. It's beautiful, Sage said, admiring the braided leatherwork. I made it years ago, Diana explained. For a Mustang filly I rehabilitated. She outgrew it quickly. She touched the soft leather wistfully. I kept it thinking someday I might need it again. Later, sitting on the porch with Morris, Sage finally allowed herself to relax. A whole year, she said. By then, they'll see how special he is. They'll have to let him stay permanently. Morris looked less certain. Sage, you heard the director? This is provisional. When he's older, they might still decide. I know, Sage interrupted, but we have time to prove ourselves now. Time to show everyone what Ember can become. The sun set over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. In the gathering dusk, Ember lifted his head, seeming to appreciate the beauty of the moment. Then he turned and walked towards Sage, stopping at the fence nearest the porch. Hey, boy, she called softly. Ember nickered in response, the sound carrying clearly through the evening air. Not the call of a domestic animal seeking food or attention, but not the cry of a wild creature, either something unique. The voice of a Mustang who had found his own path between two worlds, guided by a bond of trust and understanding that defied all expectations. In that quiet exchange, as dusk turned the world to shadow, Sage realized something profound. Their story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. What she and Ember had discovered together, this middle path between wild and tame, might just change the future for Mustangs across the West. And for a girl who once risked everything to save a dying foal, that knowledge was the most incredible outcome of all. With the BLM's decision made, life settled into a new rhythm. Sage divided her time between school homework and Ember's development. Professor Blackwood visited weekly, documenting every aspect of the foal's progress for his research. Spring matured into early summer, bringing longer days and warmer weather. Ember grew rapidly, his spindly legs lengthening his body, filling out with proper nutrition and regular exercise. His coat gleamed chestnut in the sunlight, and the white star on his forehead seemed to grow more distinctive as his face matured. One particularly hot afternoon in June, Sage led Ember to the small stream that ran through the back of their property. It was his first exposure to natural water, and he approached cautiously, sniffing the surface before tentatively touching it with his muzzle. It's just water, Sage encouraged. Like in your bucket, only better. Ember pawed at the stream, startling himself with the resulting splash. Sage laughed at his comical expression. Then, to her surprise, he deliberately pawed again, harder, creating a bigger splash. Are you playing? She asked in disbelief. Ember repeated the action, seeming to enjoy both the cool water and Sage's reaction. Soon he was splashing enthusiastically, even rolling in the shallow edges of the stream. He's playing, Professor Blackwood confirmed, lowering his camera. Sage hadn't noticed his arrival. It's significant behavior. Healthy foals play, but usually only in the safety of the herd. He feels secure enough with you to show playfulness. Sage beamed with pride. He knows he's safe with me. As Ember approached his third month, Sage began introducing more structured activities. Following Professor Blackwood's guidance, she created simple obstacle courses that challenged Ember's intelligence and built his confidence. The goal isn't to train him like a domestic horse, Professor Blackwood explained. It's to develop his natural abilities while maintaining his trust in humans. Sage took this approach to heart, focusing on rewarding Ember's curiosity rather than demanding obedience. She discovered he had an uncanny ability to problem-solve, quickly figuring out how to navigate complex obstacles or locate hidden treats. "I've never seen a young Mustang with this level of cognitive engagement," Professor Blackwood remarked one day after Ember successfully completed a particularly challenging sequence. "It's as if he understands not just what you want him to do, but why." Melissa Winters returned from her assignment in early July, shocked by how much both Sage and Ember had changed in her absence. "He's almost a real horse now," she said, watching Ember trot confidently around the paddock. "He was always a real horse," Sage corrected. "He's just healthier now." Melissa studied her daughter with a mix of pride and concern. "And you seem different too." Sage considered this. "I guess I am. Taking care of him, fighting for him, it changes you." "For the better, I think," Melissa said softly. With Melissa home, Sage finally had someone to help capture photos and videos of Ember's progress. Her mother's professional equipment produced stunning images that Sage proudly added to their documentation for the BLM. "These are beautiful, Mom," Sage said, reviewing the photos. "They really show his personality." Melissa smiled. "He's photogenic, and the connection between you two practically leaps off the screen." The monthly BLM inspections, which Sage initially dreaded, became routine. Agent Parker seemed increasingly impressed by Ember's development, though he maintained professional distance. "Director Harrison reviews all my reports personally," he mentioned during the July inspection. "She's particularly interested in your handling methods." Sage took this as a positive sign. "Does that mean she might consider letting us adopt him permanently when the year is up?" Parker's expression turned guarded. "That's not a decision I can speak to Sage. There are a lot of factors to consider." Despite these occasional reminders of Ember's uncertain future, summer unfolded with a sense of possibility. Sage began taking Ember on short walks beyond the paddock, gradually introducing him to the wider world. With each new experience, the tractor starting a plastic bag blowing in the wind, the neighbor's dog barking, Ember showed initial wariness, followed by growing confidence. "He trusts you to keep him safe," Morris observed after Ember overcame his fear of the flapping tarp on the barn roof. "That's the foundation of everything else." In mid-July, Professor Blackwood proposed a new challenge. "I'd like to document how Ember responds to unfamiliar environments," he explained. "Would you be willing to trailer him to the university's equine facility for evaluation?" Sage hesitated. "He's never been in a trailer." "Exactly," Professor Blackwood nodded. "It's the next step in his development, learning that new places can be safe too, as long as you're with him." After discussing it with Morris and Dr. Rodriguez, Sage agreed. They spent a week preparing Ember for the trailer first, just showing it to him, then encouraging him to step in while it was stationary, eventually closing the doors for short periods. "He's doing amazingly well," Dr. Rodriguez commented. "Most domestic foals take much longer to trailer train." The day of the university visit arrived hot and clear. Sage spent extra time with Ember that morning, explaining what was coming, even though she knew he didn't understand her words. "It's going to be different and maybe a little scary," she told him, stroking his now familiar star. "But I'll be with you the whole time, I promise." Yuri. Loading went smoother than expected, with Sage leading the way. Ember stepped cautiously into the trailer, turning to her for reassurance. "That's it," she encouraged. "You're so brave." Morris drove slowly, conscious of their precious cargo. Sage sat in the back seat, positioned to see Ember through the small window connecting to the trailer. He stood steadily, ears flicking at the new sensations. The University Equine Center was bustling with activity when they arrived. Students and faculty members moved between barns, horses grazed in paddocks, and the unfamiliar sounds and smells created an overwhelming environment. Ember balked at the trailer door, suddenly unsure. Sage remained calm, giving him time to adjust. "It's okay," she soothed. "Look at me. I'm right here." Gradually, Ember's trust in Sage overcame his fear of the new surroundings. He stepped down, pressing close to her side, as they walked toward the round pen where Professor Blackwood waited. "Excellent," he said, noting Ember's alert but controlled demeanor. "Let's see how he adjusts to the space." For the next hour, Sage worked with Ember in the round pen, gradually increasing the distance between them while maintaining their connection. Observers gathered to watch other professor's students, even a few ranchers invited by Professor Blackwood, to witness the unique approach. "Notice how she never forces him," Professor Blackwood explained to the group. "The Mustang chooses to follow directions because of trust, not fear." By the time they finished, Ember was confidently exploring the round pen, still checking in with Sage but showing remarkable adaptation to his new environment. "This is groundbreaking," one of the other professors commented. "The implications for rehabilitation methods are significant." On the drive home, Sage couldn't stop smiling. Ember had handled everything beautifully further, proving how special he was. As the trailer turned onto their driveway, she felt a surge of hope. Surely now, with Professor Blackwood's research and all their documentation, the BLM would see that Ember belonged with her permanently. But as Morris parked the truck, Sage noticed an unfamiliar car beside the house. A man stepped out, one she didn't recognize, but whose official-looking attire sent a chill through her. "Mr. Winters, Miss Winters," he called as they exited the vehicle. "I'm Paul Davidson, Regional Supervisor for the BLM. I need to speak with you about a change in policy that affects your fostering arrangement." Sage's momentary triumph evaporated, replaced by a sinking dread. Just when everything seemed to be going perfectly, the uncertain future she'd been trying to ignore had suddenly arrived at their door. Sage stood frozen beside the trailer, her hand still on the latch as if keeping it closed might somehow protect Ember from whatever this BLM supervisor had come to say. "What change in policy?" Morris asked, stepping forward protectively. Davidson gestured toward the house. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." Sage insisted, her voice steadier than she felt. Davidson sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Very well. I've been sent to inform you that due to recent budget cuts, the BLM is consolidating all Mustang rehabilitation programs. Foster arrangements like yours are being reviewed for potential transfer to centralized facilities." "Transfer?" Sage echoed, her stomach dropping. "You mean taking Ember away? But we have an agreement for a full year." "That agreement included provisions for policy adjustments," Davidson explained, his tone bureaucratic. "Director Harrison asked me to personally assess the situation before any decisions are made." Morris placed a steadying hand on Sage's shoulder. "When was this decided?" "The budget cuts were announced last week. The consolidation plan was approved yesterday." Davidson glanced at the trailer. "I understand you've just returned from the university." Sage nodded numbly. "Professor Blackwood called me," Davidson revealed. "He spoke highly of your work with the Mustang. That's part of why I'm here to see for myself." Sage's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Not now, when Ember was thriving, when they'd made so much progress. "Can we show you," she asked suddenly, "can we show you what Ember can do? How well he's doing here?" Davidson hesitated, then nodded. "That's why I'm here." With trembling hands, Sage unlatched the trailer. Ember emerged cautiously, immediately sensing her distress. He pressed against her nostrils, flaring as he sensed the stranger. For the next hour, Sage demonstrated everything Ember had learned: his response to voice commands, his problem-solving abilities, the trust he'd developed. Davidson watched silently, taking occasional notes. "He's quite remarkable," he finally admitted. Professor Blackwood wasn't exaggerating. "So you can see why moving him would be a mistake," Sage pressed. "He's bonded to me, to this place. A facility would traumatize him." Davidson's expression remained neutral. "I need to speak with Director Harrison. The final decision isn't mine to make." "When will we know?" Morris asked. "By the end of the week." Davidson handed Morris his card. "I'll be in touch." After he left, Sage collapsed onto the porch steps, adrenaline draining from her body. "They can't take him, Grandpa. They just can't." Morris sat beside her, looking older than his years. "Sage, we always knew this was a possibility. But it's not fair. We've done everything right. Ember is healthy. He's learning. He's happy." Her voice broke. "Why can't they see that this is where he belongs? Government agencies don't always work on what's fair. Morris said gently. They work on policies, budgets, and procedures. Sage stared at Ember, now grazing peacefully in the paddock, unaware that his world might soon be upended again. I'm not giving up, she said, determination hardening her voice. If they try to take him, You'll what? Morris interrupted. Break the law, put yourself in legal jeopardy, put me in legal jeopardy. The question stopped Sage short. She hadn't thought that far ahead. There are other ways to fight, Morris continued more gently. Legal ways. Let's call Diana Coleman and Professor Blackwood. They have connections influence. Sage nodded slowly, pulling out her phone. This was too important to face alone. Within hours, their small ranch became a hub of activity. Diana arrived first, immediately making calls to her contacts in wild horse advocacy groups. Professor Blackwood followed, bringing documentation of Ember's exceptional progress. Even Dr. Rodriguez appeared armed with medical records proving the benefits of Ember's current arrangement. The consolidation plan isn't final yet, Diana informed them, covering the phone with her hand during one call. There's pushback from several conservation groups. Davidson seemed impressed with Ember, Morris offered. That has to count for something. Sage said little, moving between the house and the barn, checking on Ember, as if reassuring herself he was still there. Willow found her sitting in the paddock, Ember's head resting in her lap. Mom's talking to someone from the governor's office, Willow said, sitting beside her. Dad doesn't know, she added with a small smile. Sage managed a weak smile in return. Thanks for helping. Willow shrugged. Ember's special. Even I can see that. The next morning, Sage awakened to her phone ringing. It was Professor Blackwood. Sage, I've just spoken with Director Harrison, he said without preamble. She's agreed to meet with us this afternoon to discuss Ember's case specifically. Sage's heart leaped. Us? You mean I can come too? You should be there. This is about demonstrating the unique bond you formed. Davidson's report was quite positive, by the way. He paused. The meeting is set for 3 o'clock at the regional BLM office. An hour's drive away, Sage spent the morning with Ember, trying to appear normal despite her churning anxiety. I'm fighting for you, she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. I promise. The BLM office was an unremarkable government building, its beige walls and fluorescent lighting, a stark contrast to the emotional weight of what was at stake. Sage, Morris, Professor Blackwood, and Diana waited in uncomfortable chairs while a receptionist announced their arrival. Director Harrison emerged from an inner office, her expression giving nothing away. Thank you for coming, she said formally. Let's talk in the conference room. The room felt oppressively official, a long table surrounded by chairs, maps of federal lands covering the walls, a presentation screen at one end. Davidson was already seated along with 2 other officials Sage didn't recognize. I understand there's concern about our consolidation plans as they relate to Mustang Foal WY2467, Director Harrison began. His name is Ember. Sage interjected, then flushed as all eyes turned to her. Rather than reprimanding her, Director Harrison nodded. Ember. Professor Blackwood has submitted additional research materials highlighting the unique aspects of your fostering methods. Diana leaned forward, speaking as someone with extensive experience in Mustang rehabilitation. What Sage has accomplished with Ember is unprecedented. Moving him now would not only erase that progress, but potentially cause lasting psychological damage. One of the unknown officials cleared his throat. Mrs. Coleman, with all due respect, wild horses are adaptable by nature. Our facilities are designed for their specific needs. Institutional facilities can't provide what Sage has given this foal, Professor Blackwood countered. The one-on-one bonding, the constant positive reinforcement, the individualized approach to his development. Sage listened to the adults argue scientific terms and policy language flying over her head. Her frustration mounted until suddenly she couldn't remain silent. Excuse me, she interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. You're all talking about Ember like he's a research project or a policy problem, but he's not. He's an individual. He has feelings. He has needs. And he trusts me. She pulled out her phone, showing a video she'd recorded just yesterday. Ember following her without a lead, responding to her soft voice commands, pressing his face against her shoulder in a gesture of affection. This isn't just training, she continued. This is a relationship. Ember doesn't just obey me, he communicates with me. He tells me when he's scared or confused. He looks to me for reassurance. If you take him away, her voice broke, he won't understand why. He'll think I abandoned him just like his mother did. The room fell silent. Even Director Harrison seemed affected by Sage's emotional plea. After a moment, she asked, "May I see more of these videos?" For the next half hour, Sage shared documentation of Ember's journey from the fragile newborn fighting for life to the confident young Mustang he was becoming. She explained each milestone, each breakthrough, with the passion and knowledge of someone who had lived every moment of the journey. When she finished, Director Harrison studied her thoughtfully. "You care deeply for this animal." "I love him," Sage said simply, "and I think he loves me too as much as a horse can." Director Harrison glanced at Davidson, who gave a slight nod. "Your case has merit," she admitted, "but I cannot make exceptions based solely on emotional bonds. There must be objective justification for deviating from policy." "There is," Professor Blackwood interjected. "My research conclusively shows that Sage's methods are producing results we haven't achieved in institutional settings. If we want to develop better rehabilitation protocols for orphaned Mustangs, we need to study this case further." Director Harrison considered this. "And you believe these methods could be applied more broadly?" "With proper study and documentation, yes," Professor Blackwood confirmed. "But removing Ember now would terminate the most promising research case we've had in years." The mention of research seemed to resonate with Director Harrison in a way that emotional appeals didn't. She turned to the other officials and they engaged in a hushed conversation. Finally, she addressed the group. "I propose a compromise. The foster arrangement will continue under enhanced research protocols. Professor Blackwood will expand his study to include regular evaluations at the university facility. The BLM will receive monthly detailed reports, and a final determination regarding permanent placement will be made at the one-year mark as originally planned." Relief flooded through Sage. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a reprieve, a chance to continue proving that Ember belonged with her. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. As they left the building, Diana squeezed Sage's shoulder. "You did well in there. Spoke from the heart, but also demonstrated your knowledge. That's a powerful combination." "Will it be enough?" Sage asked. "When the year's up." Diana's expression turned serious. "That depends on a lot of factors, but you've got allies now and evidence on your side." Back at the ranch, Sage rushed to Ember, throwing her arms around his neck. "We did it, boy. You can stay for now at least." Morris watched from the fence, his weathered face a mix of relief and lingering concern. The battle had been won, but the war for Ember's future was far from over. Ishwarn. Summer faded into fall, bringing crisp air and changing leaves. Ember continued to grow his frame, filling out his confidence increasing. The monthly evaluations at the university became routine, with Ember even seeming to enjoy the outings. "He likes the attention," Professor Blackwood observed during one session as Ember showed off his ability to navigate a complex obstacle course. "He knows when he's impressing people," Sage laughed. "He's definitely not shy about showing off." The enhanced research protocol turned out to be a blessing in disguise. With the university's resources behind them, they could document Ember's abilities more thoroughly, creating compelling evidence of his unique development. Several scientific publications expressed interest in Professor Blackwood's preliminary findings. "They're calling it the Winter's Method," he told Sage one afternoon. "Your approach to gentling without breaking spirit." Sage blushed. "I wasn't using a method. I was just loving him." "Sometimes the best methods aren't planned," Professor Blackwood replied. "They emerge from instinct and observation." In late September, an unexpected opportunity arose. The university was hosting a symposium on wild horse management, bringing together researchers, BLM officials, ranchers, and conservation advocates. "I'd like Ember to be part of a demonstration," Professor Blackwood told Sage. "A living example of what's possible with the right approach." Sage hesitated. "Will there be a lot of people? He's never been around crowds." "There will," Professor Blackwood acknowledged, "but we'll prepare him gradually and your presence will reassure him." After discussing it with Morris and Dr. Rodriguez, Sage agreed. For the next 3 weeks, they worked on desensitizing Ember to new stimuli, different people, unusual objects, varying noise levels. He responded remarkably well, his natural curiosity overcoming initial wariness. The day of the symposium dawned clear and cool. Sage barely slept the night before, anxiety and excitement keeping her awake. What if Ember panicked? What if he made a mistake? So much depended on showing how special he was. "He'll sense your nervousness," Morris reminded her as they loaded Ember into the trailer. "Remember to breathe." Sage nodded, forcing herself to relax. "We've got this," she told Ember, stroking his gleaming neck. "We're going to show them all." The university arena was packed with people when they arrived. Researchers in professional attire, government officials with badges, ranchers in worn jeans and boots, all gathered to discuss the fate of America's wild horses. Sage's stomach tightened at the sight of Director Harrison in the front row. Professor Blackwood met them at the entrance. "Perfect timing. We're on in 20 minutes. There's a warm-up area behind the arena." Sage led Ember to the designated space, letting him acclimate to the sounds and smells. Despite the bustling environment, he remained calm, his focus on Sage unwavering. "Ladies and gentlemen," Professor Blackwood's voice echoed through the speakers. "Today we have a unique opportunity to observe the Winters method in action. What you're about to witness represents a new approach to Mustang rehabilitation, one that honors the animal's wild nature while building trust-based human connections." Sage took a deep breath as they were introduced, leading Ember into the arena. The sudden appearance of so many people made him hesitate momentarily, but a soft word from Sage steadied him. For the next 15 minutes, they demonstrated everything Ember had learned. He responded to voice commands, navigated obstacles, showed problem-solving abilities, all without restraint or physical guidance. The crowd watched in stunned silence as this young Mustang born wild performed with the willing cooperation usually seen only in horses raised from birth in domestic settings. "The key distinction," Professor Blackwood explained to the audience, "is that traditional training asks, how can we make the horse do what we want? While the Winters method asks, how can we show the horse that what we want is also in its best interest?" As they finished their demonstration, the arena erupted in applause. Ember's ears flicked nervously at the sudden noise, but he remained steady beside Sage. "That was incredible," a woman near the exit told Sage as they left the arena. "I've worked with Mustangs for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that level of willing cooperation." Similar comments followed them as they cooled down in the preparation area. Researchers asked questions, ranchers expressed skepticism, but admitted they were impressed, and conservation advocates practically glowed with vindication. Director Harrison approached last, her usual formal demeanor softened slightly. "That was quite a demonstration, Miss Winters." "Thank you," Sage replied, continuing to stroke Ember's neck. "He's a good student, and you're clearly an exceptional teacher." Director Harrison studied them both. "Professor Blackwood's research is generating significant interest. There are those who believe your approach could revolutionize our rehabilitation protocols." Sage's heart leaped. "Does that mean—" "It means," Director Harrison interrupted gently, "that your case is being watched closely. Continue the good work you're doing. Document everything. The final decision at the 1-year mark will take all this into account." It wasn't the firm commitment Sage hoped for, but there was a new warmth in Director Harrison's tone that wasn't there before. As she walked away, Sage allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were one step closer to keeping Ember forever. But nature, like bureaucracy, follows its own timeline, and the Wyoming winter approaching on the horizon would bring challenges. No one could anticipate challenges that would test the bond between Sage and Ember in ways that no symposium or research protocol ever could. October brought Wyoming's first frost, painting the landscape in crystalline white each morning. Ember, now 7 months old, had grown into a handsome young Mustang. His chestnut coat thickened in preparation for winter, and his once gangly frame had developed the powerful muscles characteristic of his wild ancestors. "He doesn't even look like the same horse," Melissa remarked one morning, snapping photos of Ember, racing around the paddock, his breath visible in the crisp air. Sage beamed with pride. "But he still acts the same, still comes when I call, still follows me everywhere." The university demonstrations had become regular events, with Ember gaining something of a following among students and faculty. Professor Blackwood's research had expanded to include 2 more orphaned foals being raised with adaptations of Sage's methods, though neither had formed the remarkable bond that existed between Sage and Ember. "It's not just the method," Professor Blackwood explained during one of his weekly visits. It's also individual chemistry. Some humans and some horses just connect in ways science can't fully explain. As Halloween approached, Sheriff Howard stopped by with concerning news. "We're looking at a harsh winter," he told Morris as they stood watching Sage work with Ember in the paddock. "Weather Service is predicting record snowfall, maybe even some early blizzards." Morris nodded grimly. "We'll stock up on supplies, make sure the generator's working." Sheriff Howard hesitated. "There's something else. Reed Coleman was at the town meeting last night talking about the wild herds. Says they're moving closer to ranching land than usual. Might be sensing the bad weather coming." Sage, overhearing as she approached the fence, frowned. "The thunder sky heard Ember's herd." Sheriff Howard confirmed. "Coleman's pushing for an emergency roundup before winter. Says it's for the horses' own safety, but we all know he just wants them off potential grazing land." "They can't do that," Sage protested. "The herds know how to survive winter. They've been doing it for centuries." Sheriff Howard shrugged apologetically. "Just thought you should know. BLM's sending representatives to assess the situation next week." After he left, Sage stood silently watching Ember trot around the paddock. "What are you thinking?" Morris asked gently. "About Ember's real family out there," Sage admitted. "His father, his siblings, maybe. If they round them up—" Morris placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's not your fight, Sage." But the worry lingered, adding another layer of anxiety to Sage's already complicated feelings about Ember's future. 2 days later, the first winter storm hit with unexpected ferocity. What began as gentle snowfall in the morning became a howling blizzard by afternoon. School closed early and Morris picked Sage up in the truck, the wipers barely keeping the windshield clear. "This is a bad one," he muttered, squinting through the whiteout conditions. "Radio says it might last through tomorrow." Sage's thoughts immediately went to Ember, though he had a warm stall in the barn. This was his first experience with such extreme weather. As soon as they reached home, Sage raced to the barn, relieved to find it warm and secure, Ember contentedly munching hay. "Hey, hey, boy!" she greeted him, brushing snow from her coat. "Crazy weather, huh?" The storm intensified through the evening. Wind rattled the windows of the ranch house, and the power flickered several times before going out completely around 9 o'clock. "Good thing we got that generator serviced," Morris said, lighting lanterns while Melissa started the wood stove. Sage couldn't settle her thoughts, repeatedly turning to Ember. "I'm going to check the barn again," she announced, pulling on her heavy coat. "Sage, it's dangerous out there," Melissa protested. "The barn is secure. Ember is fine." "I just need to make sure," Sage insisted. Morris sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of her jaw. "Take the emergency radio and the lantern. If anything looks wrong, you call immediately. You don't try to handle it yourself." Sage nodded, bundling up in layers before stepping out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet, and the snow was already knee-deep in places. She struggled toward the barn, the lantern light creating an eerie glow in the swirling white. Inside the barn was significantly colder than earlier, though still sheltered from the worst of the storm. Ember whinnied when he saw her pressing his nose against the stall door. "Just checking on you," Sage told him, setting down the lantern to stroke his face. "Making sure you're—" A sharp crack interrupted her, followed by a groaning sound that raised the hair on her neck. Sage looked up just as a portion of the barn roof gave way under the weight of accumulated snow, collapsing inward with a thunderous crash. The section fell mercifully away from Ember's stall, but the horse panicked, rearing and kicking at the sudden noise and rush of cold air. Sage fumbled for the emergency radio with trembling hands. "Grandpa, part of the barn roof collapsed. Ember's okay, but—" Another crack interrupted her. More of the roof was giving way. "Get out of there, Sage," Morris's voice crackled through the radio. "Now!" "I can't leave Ember," she cried, moving to open his stall. "Don't open the stall," Morris shouted. "If he bolts in this storm, he'll die. Come back to the house. We'll figure out what to do." Sage hesitated, torn between obeying her grandfather and staying with her frightened horse. Ember's eyes were wide with fear, his breathing rapid. "I'll be back," she promised him. "Stay calm." The journey back to the house seemed twice as long, the wind having erased her footprints already. By the time she stumbled through the door, her face was numb from cold. "The north section collapsed," she gasped as Morris helped her remove her frozen coat. Ember's stall is still intact, but he's terrified. We have to do something. Morris's expression was grim. In this weather, our options are limited. We can't repair the roof until the storm passes. But that could be days, Sage protested. He'll freeze. His stall has 3 solid walls and a door, Morris reminded her. If we can reinforce the ceiling, somehow create a temporary barrier. They spent the next hour gathering materials, tarps, plywood from the storage shed rope. By the time they were ready to head back to the barn, the storm had intensified further. I should go alone, Morris said, eyeing the whiteout conditions. No, Sage insisted. I need to calm Ember. He'll panic more with just you. Melissa, who had been silent during their preparations, suddenly spoke up. I'm coming too. You'll need an extra pair of hands. The 3 of them struggled through the snow connected by a rope to avoid separation in the blinding conditions. Inside the barn, the situation had worsened. More sections of roof had partially collapsed, and the temperature had dropped significantly. Ember's stall, while still structurally sound, was now exposed to the elements from above. We need to work fast, Morris shouted over the howling wind. For the next 2 hours, they labored in freezing conditions, securing the tarp and plywood over Ember's stall to create a makeshift roof. The horse remained agitated, but Sage's presence helped keep him from complete panic. That's the best we can do until the storm breaks. Morris finally declared his breath-forming clouds in the frigid air. It's not perfect, but it should keep the worst of the snow out. Sage stroked Ember's neck, noting the way he trembled. He's so cold. We've got those horse blankets from Mrs. Palmer, Melissa suggested. They layered 2 heavy blankets over Ember, securing them carefully. Sage brought extra hay to help him generate body heat through digestion. I'm staying with him, she announced as they prepared to leave. Absolutely not, Morris responded firmly. It's not safe, Sage. He's terrified Grandpa. If I leave him alone, if that roof collapses completely, you could be killed, Morris interrupted. I'm not risking you. Sage looked at Ember, torn between her need to protect him and her grandfather's authority. Finally, she nodded reluctantly. I'll come back at first light, she promised the horse, pressing her forehead against his. None of them slept much that night, taking turns checking the weather radio for updates. The storm was predicted to continue through the following day, with temperatures dropping further. Dawn brought no relief, just muted grayish light filtering through relentless snowfall. Sage was pulling on her coat before the others were fully awake. I'm checking on Ember, she announced. I'm coming with you. Morris insisted, already reaching for his boots. The scene that greeted them at the barn was disheartening. Their makeshift repairs had held but barely. Snow had found its way through gaps in the covering, creating small drifts inside Ember's stall. The horse stood huddled in a corner, his blankets dusted with snow, his breath coming in visible puffs. This isn't working, Sage said, voice tight with worry. He can't stay out here. Morris surveyed the damage to the broader barn structure. It's not safe to move him to another stall. The whole north section could go at any time. Sage made a sudden decision. Then he's coming to the house. Morris stared at her. Sage, we did it when he was a foal, she reminded him. The mudroom has that wide door to the outside. We can clear a path, bring him in there. He's not a foal anymore, Morris pointed out. He's a half-grown Mustang. A half-grown Mustang who trusts me, Sage countered, who will freeze to death if we leave him here. Morris studied her determined expression, then sighed. Let's talk to your mother. To Sage's surprise, Melissa immediately supported the plan. The mudroom has concrete floors. We can put down straw. It's not ideal, but it's better than leaving him in a collapsing barn. They spent an exhausting morning clearing a path from the barn to the house, the snow continuing to fall as they worked. By noon, they were ready to move Ember. Leading a frightened horse through a blizzard proved even more challenging than Sage anticipated. Ember balked repeatedly, eyes rolling at the howling wind and disorienting whiteout conditions. Only Sage's reassuring presence kept him moving forward. That's it, she encouraged, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Just a little further. When they finally reached the mudroom, Ember hesitated at the threshold, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar scents. Sage stepped inside, gently tugging the lead rope. It's okay, she soothed. Remember, you've been inside before. Slowly, Ember stepped into the mudroom. The space was cramped for a horse his size, but it was warm and dry, the straw they'd spread creating comfortable footing. Most importantly, it was secure from the storm that continued to rage outside. "He made it," Melissa said with relief, helping Sage remove Ember's snow-covered blankets and replace them with dry ones. Morris nodded, looking both worried and impressed. "Let's just hope the rest of the house holds up better than the barn." The storm continued for 2 more days, breaking records for both snowfall and low temperatures. Schools remained closed, roads impassable. The Winters family settled into an unusual routine, taking turns tending to Ember in the mudroom, keeping the wood stove burning and monitoring weather updates on the emergency radio. Ember adapted to his temporary indoor housing with surprising ease, seeming to understand that he'd been brought inside for his protection. He stood quietly, accepting the limited space and unusual arrangements with a calmness that impressed even Morris. "Never seen a Mustang this adaptable," he remarked on the third morning, helping Sage muck out the mudroom. "Most would be climbing the walls by now." Sage smiled, stroking Ember's neck. "He knows we're trying to help him." When the storm finally broke, the world outside was transformed. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white drifts, piled higher than the fence posts in places. The barn stood partially collapsed, the damage even worse than they'd feared. "It'll take weeks to repair," Morris said, surveying the scene. "And with more storms predicted," Sage watched his expression carefully. "So Ember stays in the mudroom?" Morris ran a hand through his gray hair. "For now, at least, until we can get the barn assessed. We'll need to figure out a better arrangement for waste management." Sage threw her arms around him. "Thank you, Grandpa." As they were heading back to the house, the phone rang for the first time since power was restored. Melissa answered, her expression growing concerned as she listened. "It's for you," she told Sage, holding out the phone. "Professor Blackwood." "Sage?" His voice crackled through the line reception, still spotty after the storm. "Are you all right out there?" "We're okay," she assured him. "Barn roof partially collapsed, but we brought Ember into the mudroom. He's doing fine." "Good, good," Professor Blackwood said, sounding distracted. "Listen, Sage, there's something you should know. The BLM conducted an emergency roundup during the storm." Sage's stomach dropped. "The Thunder Sky heard Ember's herd." "Yes, Reed Coleman convinced them the horses were at risk. They used helicopters before the worst of the storm hit. But they know how to survive winter." Sage protested the same argument she'd made days earlier to Sheriff Howard. "I know," Professor Blackwood said grimly, "but Coleman has influence with certain officials. The herd is being held at the BLM facility outside of Sheridan." Sage thought of Ember safe in their mudroom while his family was captured, confused, confined. "That's not right." "There's more," Professor Blackwood continued. "The roundup is receiving media attention. A reporter was embedded with the BLM team. They're doing a feature on Mustang management." "How is that relevant to us?" Sage asked, confused. "The reporter heard about our research project about Ember. They want to include your story as a contrast to the traditional roundup approach." Sage's mind raced. "Would that help with keeping Ember permanently? I mean, public opinion can be powerful." "It could," Professor Blackwood admitted. "If people see what you've accomplished with Ember, how you saved him from this very storm that was used to justify rounding up his herd." "I'll do it," Sage said immediately. After she hung up, she relayed the conversation to Morris and Melissa. "Media attention could complicate things," Morris cautioned. "The BLM might not appreciate being publicly questioned." "Or it could be exactly what we need," Melissa countered. "I've seen how this works in conservation efforts. Public interest creates pressure for policy changes." Sage looked through the mudroom door at Ember, who watched her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand far more than a horse should. "It's not just about keeping Ember anymore," she said quietly. "It's about what happens to all the Mustangs as family. Maybe this is how we make a difference." As another storm gathered on the horizon, Sage made her decision. The story of a girl and an orphaned Mustang surviving together through Wyoming's harshest winter in decades might just change more than their own lives. It might change the fate of wild horses across the state. And with that realization, Sage Winters, who once rescued a dying foal simply because she couldn't walk away, took her first step toward becoming something she never imagined: an advocate, a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. Panikidawan. The reporter arrived 3 days later, a tall woman named Julia Chen from National Geographic. She navigated the snow-covered driveway in a four-wheel drive vehicle equipped with chains, camera equipment visible through the windows. "Quite a setup you have here," she commented, eyeing Ember through the mudroom door. "When Professor Blackwood told me you had a Mustang living in your house, I thought he was exaggerating." Sage stood protectively near Ember. "It's temporary until we can repair the barn." Julia's eyes softened. "I'm not here to judge Sage. I'm here to tell your story. From what I understand, it's a remarkable one." Over the next 2 days, Julia documented everything: the collapsed barn, the makeshift accommodations, Ember's unusual behaviors. She photographed Sage working with him in the snowy paddock they'd managed to clear, interviewed Morris about the night of the rescue, and spoke with Professor Blackwood by phone about the research implications. "What made you decide to save him?" Julia asked Sage as they sat at the kitchen table, steaming mugs of hot chocolate between them. "You must have known it would be challenging." Sage considered the question. "I didn't really decide. I just couldn't leave him there to die." She paused. "It felt like he was meant to find me as much as I was meant to find him." "And now his herd has been rounded up," Julia prompted. "How does that make you feel? Sad? Angry?" Sage stared into her mug. "They would have survived the winter. They always have. Rounding them up was about ranching interests, not the horses' welfare." Julia nodded, making notes. "Reed Coleman has been quoted saying wild horses damage grazing lands and compete with cattle." "Mustangs were here first," Sage responded, an edge to her voice. "They're part of this landscape. We've just forgotten how to share it with them." On the final day of Julia's visit, unexpected sunshine broke through the clouds. The temperature rose just enough to begin melting the top layer of snow, creating a glistening landscape. "Perfect light for final photographs," Julia declared, gesturing toward the open area behind the house. "Could you work with Ember out there? Show me what he can do." Sage led Ember outside the horse, stepping carefully through the snow. Despite the cramped conditions of the past week, he'd maintained his fitness, prancing excitedly in the open space. As Julia photographed them, Sage put Ember through the exercises they'd developed together: voice commands, problem-solving challenges, trust-based movements. The Mustang responded perfectly, his bond with Sage evident in every interaction. "He seems to read your mind," Julia remarked, adjusting her camera lens. "Not my mind," Sage corrected. "My body language, my tone. He pays attention in a way most people don't." Julia lowered her camera, studying them both. "You know, I came here expecting to write about unconventional Mustang rehabilitation, but this is something more. This is about connection across species." Sage smiled, stroking Ember's neck. "That's what Professor Blackwood keeps saying. That understanding this connection could change how we work with all wild horses," Julia added thoughtfully, "and potentially save many from roundups and holding facilities." After Julia left, promising the article would appear within a month, Sage felt a curious mix of hope and anxiety. Public attention could help their case with the BLM, but it also meant their private struggle would become very public. "Are you ready for that?" Melissa asked her daughter, sensing her unease. Sage watched Ember through the window, the Mustang now comfortable enough to graze in the snowy yard without constant supervision. "If it helps him stay with us, I'm ready for anything," she answered. The article appeared faster than expected. Mustang Miracle. How a Wyoming teen and an orphaned foal are changing wild horse management ran as a feature in the magazine's online edition, first then, the print version a week later. Julia's piece was thoughtful and nuanced, contrasting Sage's approach with traditional methods. It detailed the night of Ember's rescue, his remarkable development, and the research implications of their bond. Most powerfully, it juxtaposed images of Ember thriving under Sage's care, with photos of the rounded-up Thunder Sky herd in holding pens. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The winter's phone rang constantly. Emails flooded Professor Blackwood's university account. Local news stations requested interviews. Even national morning shows expressed interest. "This is bigger than I expected," Morris admitted, disconnecting from yet another call. Sage was both thrilled and overwhelmed. "Will it help with the BLM's decision?" "It can't hurt," Morris replied. "Public opinion is a powerful thing." The article's timing coincided with the beginning of a thaw. As February gave way to March, temperatures rose enough to begin repairing the barn. Neighbors showed up unannounced to help, inspired by the story they'd read. Even Sheriff Howard arrived on his day off, toolbox in hand. "Whole town's talking about you and that Mustang," he told Sage as they worked. "Never seen anything bring people together quite like this." More surprisingly, Diana Coleman appeared with building supplies donated by local businesses. Reed's furious about the article. She confided to Sage with a small smile. "Says it makes ranchers look like villains." "I never said that," Sage protested. Diana shrugged. "No, but the contrast between Ember's story and the roundup speaks for itself." She glanced toward the house where Ember could be seen through the mudroom window. "How's he handling all the attention?" "Better than I am," Sage admitted. "He seems to enjoy meeting new people now." The most unexpected visitor arrived on a chilly March morning. Sage was in the paddock with Ember now returned to the repaired barn, but still allowed house privileges during cold nights when a government vehicle pulled into the driveway. Director Harrison stepped out, her formal attire, looking out of place against the muddy spring landscape. "Miss Winters," she greeted Sage. "I see your barn has been repaired." Sage nodded cautiously. "The community helped." "So I've heard." Director Harrison approached the fence, studying Ember. "Your Mustang has become quite famous." "The article wasn't my idea," Sage began defensively. Director Harrison raised a hand. "I didn't come to reprimand you. Quite the opposite. The publicity has created opportunities." "Opportunities," Sage echoed. "The BLM has been under pressure to revise our Mustang management protocols. The holding facilities are overcrowded, adoptions are down, and the roundups grow more controversial each year." She met Sage's gaze directly. "Your case presents an alternative approach that's generating significant public interest." Sage's heart beat faster. "Does that mean—" "It means," Director Harrison continued, "that I've recommended your foster arrangement be extended for research purposes. Furthermore, I've suggested a pilot program based on your methods with you and Professor Blackwood as consultants." Sage could hardly believe what she was hearing. "And Ember," a hint of a smile crossed Director Harrison's face, "after your foster period concludes, I see no reason why adoption wouldn't be approved, particularly given the unique circumstances." Joy burst through Sage like a physical force. She wanted to shout, to dance, to throw her arms around Ember's neck and never let go. Instead, she managed a somewhat dignified "thank you." Director Harrison nodded, her expression softening further. "Your dedication is admirable, Miss Winters. You've taught us something valuable about these animals and perhaps about ourselves as well." After she left, Sage raced to Ember, burying her face in his mane. "You're staying," she whispered. "You're really staying." Morris and Melissa found her there, tears streaming down her face as she hugged the bemused Mustang. "Director Harrison says we can adopt him," she told them through her tears, "and they want us to help with a pilot program for other orphan foals." Melissa embraced her daughter. "I'm so proud of you, Sage. You fought for what you believed in, and you changed minds." Over the following weeks, Sage's life transformed in ways she never anticipated. Professor Blackwood organized a formal research program at the university with Sage and Ember as central participants. They developed training protocols for BLM handlers, working with newly rescued Mustangs, focusing on trust building rather than dominance. Most surprisingly, Sage found herself becoming a reluctant public speaker. Schools requested presentations, conservation groups sought her input, and even skeptical ranchers' associations invited her to explain her methods. "I never wanted to be a spokesperson," she confided to Willow, who had become a true friend through the shared experience. "I just wanted to save Ember." Willow smiled. "Sometimes the most important voices are the ones that never plan to speak up." As spring fully arrived, turning the Wyoming landscape green once again, Sage received an unexpected invitation. The BLM was releasing a portion of the Thunder Sky herd back to the wild on expanded protected lands, farther from ranching interests. "We'd like you and Ember to be present," Agent Parker explained during a visit, "partly for publicity, but also because, well, it's his family in a way." Sage felt a complex rush of emotions. The thought of seeing Ember's birth herd, perhaps even the stallion who fathered him, was powerful. But it also raised a question she'd avoided confronting. Would Ember be happier with his own kind? The night before the release, she sat in the barn with Ember stroking his gleaming coat. Tomorrow you'll see where you came from, she told him softly, the life you might have had. Ember nuzzled her shoulder, his warm breath tickling her neck. He seemed to sense her melancholy pressing closer, as if in reassurance. I'd let you go, she whispered, tears welling. If that's what you wanted, I'd find the strength. But I hope you choose to stay. The release site was a remote valley miles from the nearest ranch. Media had gathered to document the event, cameras trained on the trailers containing the Mustangs. Sage stood with Ember nearby, the now yearling Mustang alert, but calm amidst the activity. Nervous? Professor Blackwood asked, joining them. Sage nodded. What if he wants to join them? Professor Blackwood studied Ember thoughtfully. That's always the test of a true bond, isn't it? Whether it survives freedom of choice? The moment the trailers opened was breathtaking. Wild Mustangs poured forth like a living river, manes flying, hooves thundering across the valley floor. Their power and beauty silenced even the chattering reporters. These were not broken creatures despite their months in captivity. They were the embodiment of the American West's untamed spirit. Sage felt Ember tense beside her, his ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. He recognized something in those distant figures, a shared heritage, a common language. For a terrible moment, she thought he might pull away, might answer the call of his own kind. Instead, Ember shifted closer to Sage, his shoulder pressing against her side. He watched the distant herd with interest, but made no move to follow. He's chosen, Professor Blackwood said quietly. Sage wrapped an arm around Ember's neck, tears flowing freely now. You're sure? She asked the horse. You could go with them. Be free. Ember turned his head, his intelligent eyes meeting hers. There was understanding there, Sage was certain of it. Not human understanding, but something equally profound, the recognition of a bond that transcended the expected boundaries between species. As the wild herd disappeared over a distant ridge, Ember remained steadfastly at Sage's side, his choice made clear without words. Back at the ranch that evening, Sage sat on the porch steps watching Ember graze peacefully in the paddock. Morris settled beside her, following her gaze. He could have gone with them, Sage said, but he chose to stay. Morris nodded. That's what makes it special. Not that you saved him, but that having experienced both worlds, he prefers yours. Sage considered this. Not just my world, Grandpa. The world we created together, one where he's neither wild nor tame, but something in between. Something new. The sun set over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. In the gathering dusk, Ember lifted his head, seeming to appreciate the beauty of the moment. Then he turned and walked toward Sage, stopping at the fence nearest the porch. Hey, boy, she called softly. Ember nickered in response, the sound carrying clearly through the evening air. Not the call of a domestic animal seeking food or attention, but not the cry of a wild creature, either something unique. The voice of a Mustang who had found his own path between two worlds, guided by a bond of trust and understanding that defied all expectations. 18 months later, the golden light of late afternoon bathed Wind River Ranch in a warm glow. Sage, now 18, adjusted a halter on a small Palomino foal, who watched her with cautious curiosity. That's it, she encouraged softly, just like Ember taught you. The Winters Ranch had transformed over the past year and a half. The old barn had been expanded, additional paddocks built. A modest sign at the entrance read, Thunder Sky Mustang Rehabilitation Center, with the BLM logo displayed alongside their own. Ember, now a striking 2-year-old, watched from a nearby paddock. He'd grown into his frame, his chestnut coat gleaming with health, the white star on his forehead more distinctive than ever. No longer a fragile orphan, he carried himself with the natural dignity of his wild ancestors, tempered by the confidence that came from absolute trust. He's overseeing the operation, Professor Blackwood commented, joining Sage at the fence. Making sure you're doing it right. Sage laughed. He definitely has opinions about how the new foal should be handled. The Palomino was one of 5 orphaned Mustangs currently at the center, the first group in the BLM's pilot program, based on what the media now called the Winters method. Each had a story similar to Ember's, abandoned, orphaned, or injured, rescued from situations where traditional wild horse management offered little hope. How's Aurora adapting? Professor Blackwood asked, nodding toward a gray filly in the far paddock. Better every day, Sage replied. She still startles easily, but she's beginning to trust. Having Ember demonstrate behaviors helps tremendously. This had been their most unexpected discovery, Ember's ability to bridge the gap between humans and newly rescued Mustangs. The foals who initially feared human contact watched Ember's interactions, with Sage observing his comfort and trust. Somehow he communicated to them that these humans could be accepted, that cooperation didn't mean submission. It's like he's translating for us, Sage had explained to Director Harrison during her last inspection visit, teaching them that our actions mean safety, not threat. The center had garnered attention well beyond Wyoming. Researchers from universities across the country had visited, studying the rehabilitation methods Sage developed through instinct and observation. 3 graduate students were currently conducting formal studies, carefully documenting every aspect of the process. Morris emerged from the house, clipboard in hand. The group from Colorado State arrives tomorrow, he reminded Sage, and that documentary crew on Thursday. Sage nodded, suppressing a sigh. The public aspects of their work remained challenging for her, though she'd grown more comfortable with the attention. What mattered was that each successful rehabilitation strengthened their case for changing how wild horses were managed nationally. I saw Reed Coleman at the feed store, Morris added casually. Said he might stop by tomorrow. Sage's eyebrows rose in surprise. Really? Reed Coleman, once their most vocal critic, had undergone a gradual transformation of his own. The turning point came 4 months ago during the worst wildfire season in Wyoming's history. When flames threatened his north pastures, it was Sage and Ember who spotted the danger from a ridge and brought warning in time to evacuate his prized cattle. The gruff rancher never quite managed a formal thank you, but his opposition to their work softened noticeably afterward. His daughter Willow now volunteered at the center 3 afternoons a week. People can change their minds when they see results, Professor Blackwood observed. That's the power of what you're doing here. As the sun began to set, Sage completed evening rounds, checking each Mustang, making notes on their progress. She saved Ember for last, as always, bringing his special feed and spending time just being with him. Another good day, she told him, leaning against his warm shoulder as they watched the sunset together. Ember's ears swiveled toward her voice, his eyes holding that mysterious intelligence that first drew her to him. He was still not like other horses, not even like the other Mustangs. There was something unique in how he processed the world, how he formed connections, how he understood things that should be beyond equine comprehension. Sage, Melissa called from the house. Phone call. Be right back. Sage gave Ember a final pat. Inside, Melissa handed her the phone with a significant look. It's Director Harrison. Sage's stomach tightened. Despite their improved relationship, calls from the BLM director still triggered her protective instincts where Ember was concerned. Director Harrison, she answered, trying to keep her voice neutral. How can I help you? Sage. Director Harrison's voice sounded unusually warm. I'm calling with some news I wanted you to hear directly from me. The Department of Interior has approved expanded funding for the Mustang Rehabilitation Program. Your center will be the model for 5 additional facilities across the western states. Sage's breath caught. 5 more centers. Using your methods with you and Professor Blackwood providing training for the staff? Director Harrison confirmed. This is a major shift in our approach to orphaned Mustangs, Sage, and it wouldn't have happened without you and Ember proving it could work. After exchanging details and ending the call, Sage stood in stunned silence. Good news? Melissa asked, noting her expression. Sage nodded slowly. They're creating 5 more centers like ours. 5 more places where Mustangs will be given a chance, instead of just processed. Melissa hugged her daughter tightly. Your father would be so proud of you. The mention of her father brought unexpected tears to Sage's eyes. He had loved wild places, wild creatures. His death when Sage was 9 had left a void that nothing seemed to fill until Ember came into her life. He would have loved Ember, Sage whispered. He would have loved who you become because of Ember. Melissa corrected gently. Outside, Sage found Morris already in the barn, spreading fresh straw in the stalls. Grandpa, she called, the BLM is expanding the program. 5 new centers. Morris straightened a smile breaking across his weathered face. Well, look at that. From one foal to changing national policy in 2 years. Not bad for a girl who just couldn't walk away from a dying foal. Sage laughed, the joy of the moment bubbling over. I need to tell Ember. She found him at his favorite spot near the west fence, where he could watch the sunset color the distant mountains. As always, he turned at her approach, ears forward attentive. We did it, she told him, wrapping her arms around his strong neck. We really did it. 5 new centers, Ember. Hundreds of Mustangs will have the chance you had. Ember lowered his head, pressing it gently against Sage's shoulder, in the gesture that had become his signature expression of affection. In that moment of connection, Sage felt the full circle of their journey, from that desperate night on the windswept plain to this triumph that would echo across the west. Later that evening, as stars began to pepper the Wyoming sky, Sage sat on the porch with Morris and Melissa, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. You know what tomorrow is? Morris asked. Sage nodded. 2 years since I found him. Ever regret it? Melissa asked. All the work, the battles with the BLM, the publicity. Sage considered the question, watching Ember's silhouette against the moonlit paddock. Not for a second, she answered honestly. The next morning dawned clear and perfect, the kind of spring day that makes Wyoming feel like the most beautiful place on earth. Sage rose early, completing chores before the day's visitors arrived. As she worked, her mind drifted back to that night 2 years ago, the dying mare, the helpless foal, the choice that changed everything. She had acted on instinct then, with no idea of where that simple act of compassion would lead. Now, with the Mustang Rehabilitation Program expanding nationally, and Ember's story inspiring changes in wild horse management across the West, she understood that sometimes the most important actions begin with the simplest choices: to help, to care, to refuse to look away from suffering. After finishing morning rounds, Sage led Ember to their special place, a hilltop overlooking the valley where his mother's herd once roamed. They came here often, Sage sitting quietly while Ember grazed nearby. It was her way of honoring his wild heritage, of acknowledging that part of him would always belong to these open spaces. Today, watching him lift his head, scent the wind, she felt a peace she hadn't known before. The uncertain future that once haunted her had been replaced by confidence in herself and Ember, in the path they'd forged together. Happy anniversary, she told him softly. Ember turned, moving to stand beside her on the hilltop. Together they gazed out over the landscape, the young woman and the Mustang who defied all expectations. A distant herd of wild horses appeared on the horizon, moving like a flowing river across the plains. Ember watched the mirrors prick forward, but made no move to follow. His place was here, in this middle world they'd created together, neither fully wild nor fully tame, but something new and precious. In that moment, Sage understood the final lesson Ember had taught her. True freedom isn't about living without connections. It's about choosing the connections that matter most. Ember chose her not from weakness or need, but from recognition of something rare and valuable between them. As the morning sun climbed higher, warming the spring air, Sage and Ember made their way back toward the ranch, where visitors would soon arrive. More researchers, more students, more people eager to learn what a teenage girl and an orphaned Mustang discovered together. Ready to change more minds? She asked him. Ember tossed his head as if in agreement, his stride confident, as they crested the hill and the rehabilitation center came into view below. 5 new Mustang foals waited in the paddocks, each with their own story, each with the potential to build bridges between worlds, just as Ember had done. This was their legacy, not just one life saved on a stormy night, but a new understanding of what's possible when trust replaces fear, when connection replaces control. As Sage opened the gate to the center, Ember beside her, she knew that the truly incredible part of their journey wasn't simply that a girl raised an orphaned Mustang foal by hand. The incredible part was that, in saving him, she discovered a way to save so many others. And in the process, a wild Mustang and a determined girl from Wyoming changed how people see these magnificent animals, not as problems to be managed, but as partners with wisdom to share, if only we learn how to listen. The morning sun illuminated the sign at the entrance, Thunder Sky Mustang Rehabilitation Center. Below it, recently added, were the words that captured everything Sage had learned. Where trust builds bridges between worlds. Ember nudged her shoulder gently, bringing her back to the present moment. Sage smiled, stroking his gleaming neck, feeling the strong, steady pulse beneath her fingers. The heartbeat that had been so fragile 2 years ago, now powerful and sure. "Come on," she said. "We've got work to do." Together they walked through the gate, ready to continue the extraordinary journey that began with one simple act of compassion on a stormy Wyoming night. A journey that proved when a young girl raises an orphaned Mustang foal by hand, something truly incredible can happen. The world can change for the better, one heart at a time. The wind still whispers through the Wyoming valleys, carrying stories of horses that run like living flames across the landscape. But now it carries new stories too, of bridges built where fences once stood, of trust formed in the most unlikely of places. Perhaps what Sage and Ember discovered was something that had always been there waiting to be remembered. That the distance between wild and tame, between human and animal, is not as vast as we once believed. That true connection doesn't diminish wildness, it honors it. In the quiet moments when sunset paints the mountains gold and the day's work is done, Sage sometimes thinks about that stormy night when a frightened girl and a dying foal found each other. How that single choice to reach out rather than turn away rippled outward, changing not just their lives, but countless others. We all face such moments. Crossroads where compassion calls us toward the unknown, where something greater than ourselves asks us to trust, to care, to believe. What wild spirits are waiting for you to recognize them? What connections might you forge if you dared to extend your hand across the boundaries you've been told cannot be crossed? Sometimes the most profound revolutions begin with the simplest acts of kindness. And sometimes our greatest teachers come to us not in human form, but with four legs, wild eyes, and hearts that remember what we have forgotten.